Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we move to public comments, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Shelter Island Fire District and the ambulance crew that when the fires were happening on Sunrise Highway in West Hampton, they were called out for mutual aid. So we did send a truck with about 6 or so fire department members, and there was an EMS crew that also a vehicle that went out with them, a chief's car as well. So just thank you to them. People don't always realize, how broad the fire district outreach is at times. When there's something major, they are on standby. I guess they didn't get deployed, but they were in the staging area. So just want the public to be aware of that. Thank the fire department when you see them. Now we'll open it to public comments. I know Tim Pertel is here in the audience, so that if people on the proposed tree clearing is always available for questions. So if anyone has anything, you can always reach out to him, and we will double check the website to tree preservation. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I should write that down. I think Tom has. Tom, come on up.
Quick question. The last time I was here, spoke about hospital beds, and brought to my attention by Mr. Dixon that the subject was discussed in executive session. So what I'm asking is either you or the town attorney, could you explain legally how that works? Because from what I've read, it's not legal. So if I could get some clarification. That's all I have for today.
We actually don't recall us discussing that in executive session. I thought we only discussed it at the work session.
Yeah, I don't know. What are you looking for, Tom?
No, I think last time you did make a comment that we discussed it in executive session. And it wasn't executive session, it was in the work session.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I don't recall, because it's not an executive session eligible topic. And so
Yeah.
I would have, if we'd started to go down that path, they always try and stop us from breaking the rules. And Steve does as well.
And I had a couple of conversations with Emily and, the senior center people, just to find out, just to learn more. But that was just me.
Can I just mention, while this was not discussed in executive session, an attorney-client consultation is not within the definition of the term meeting as used by the open meetings law. That issue, the issue of the hospital bed, involved a discussion of potential liability. So had the board discussed that in executive session to seek the advice of counsel, that would have been appropriate. Neville, just mentioning that for everybody's information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone on Zoom who has a comment that's not an asterisk item on our agenda? Okay, then we will go to the next item, which is fresh pond remediation. And there is a WQI funding request that was heard at last Thursday's WQI meeting. And the decision at that meeting was to push the recommendation to the town board for this request, for us to hear it. So, Joe?
Yes. Before I start, has the town board received those documents from WQI?
Just, I think, sent them on Friday. Just double check.
I'm asking so I understand where to start with the conversation, if you want a project overview or you want to jump straight into discussion about, or if you have questions, you want to work towards that.
I would suggest project overview, just because while we may have seen the documents, the public,
Sure.
may not have looked for the documents, and
Sure.
also just to give everybody starting from ground zero.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so backing way up on the project, just for a little bit of historical context and updates. An analysis was done on the pond several years ago in a grant-funded effort to understand why we were seeing harmful algae blooms and why there was a decrease in water quality that was limiting public use of the pond. It was not safe for swimming, not safe for some wildlife, and ultimately that study, through a series of testing and analysis, revealed that there was an excess of phosphorus accumulated in the sediments of the bottom of the pond. Cause of that phosphorus accumulation was natural accumulation of runoff, organic material degrading, and a process that occurs over time, and it's a natural life cycle of a pond of this nature. So the project shifted into how can we remediate this, and the project team reviewed several possible treatment or remediation solutions. Ultimately, the path to move forward was a process called hypolimnetic withdrawal, which is essentially a filter for the pond. The water in the bottom, deepest portions of the pond, through osmosis and diffusion, gets the highest concentration of phosphorus as it leaves the sediments at the bottom. And this system would extract the water from the deep portions of the pond. It would filter the phosphorus out of the water, and it would return the clean water back into the pond. The concept is that over time, you will remove all of that extra phosphorus. The filtration system removes more phosphorus than we know is entering the system every year. So we're creating this negative balance. And eventually, we will have removed all of that extra phosphorus, and we will not see those harmful algae blooms anymore. So that's the concept of remediation.
How much of the phosphorus that gets removed? How is it disposed of?
It's a sediment that comes out, and it's a relatively small quantity. We're talking about a couple of kilos a year, but it gets precipitated out. Yeah.
Is it sent to Brookhaven? Is it?
It's not a hazardous material. We can work it in with other like organic materials at the landfill and such. That's your question, Benjamin?
Yeah.
So where we're at with the specific request that's before you is that the town developed phase one or pilot level plans for the system. Those plans are now permitted by the state. The regulating authority is New York State DEC. So they've issued us a permit to do this work. They've reviewed and approved our work plan and our design. And we then applied for funding from the same agency, actually, New York State DEC. And they've awarded us $260,000 out of the total $325,000 project budget. And so last week I presented to the local water quality improvement advisory board with a request for half of that project balance. So the total match that's required for this grant is $65,000. Half of that has been offered by the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association as their contribution to the project cost, and the other half is what's been requested from the local WQI committee, and I believe they ultimately voted to recommend this to the board for your review of the funding, but that is the financial request that's before the board now. The project is in the contract phases with the grant. And so if we move expeditiously on securing the grant match funding, we still have a pathway forward to starting this project this summer. The pilot level effort will last for approximately 3 months. And then all of that data we receive will help inform the phase two, which is the full scale project. That project would potentially run for several years, but this project is just a single, one-time 3 month effort. So that's all that's the commitment that's before the board right now.
Couple of questions. When this project came before us last year, I was able to secure an undertaking from the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association to be responsible for raising the money if there is a shortfall. As you know very well, we applied for the New York State grant, which we received. We applied for a Suffolk County grant, which we did not receive.
That's right.
And that's what has caused the $65,000 shortfall.
That's right.
So last year, Fresh Pond Neighbors Association said that they would take on raising the shortfall. But more importantly, where are we with reapplying for the Suffolk County grant? Because if I remember correctly, when Suffolk County turned us down, they said, we actually like this project, we just can't do it right now, come back to us. And where are we with that?
That cycle does not begin until this summer. So that's an option to pursue again if we choose not to fund this locally, but it would cause a delay of at least 1 year in the project. We could not begin the project this summer. So
That's, okay, so it's a timing for the summer question, because if I also remember correctly, the New York State grant is still available for a certain amount of time. I mean, there's enough time.
the one that we've been awarded?
Yes.
Yes, I forget the number of years, but it's a number of years.
Yeah, it's like 2 or 3 years.
So it's available to us in that extended schedule as well. The county grant application is exactly how you just described. It ranked very high. There were a lot of projects last year that were scored above us, but they did send us positive feedback to reapply. So that is an option. It would involve the project being delayed 1 full year. That's right. And
So the only reason this is before us now is because they want to do it now, as opposed to wait another year.
I wouldn't say that's the only reason. That's certainly a reason, is to be able to expedite the grant that's been awarded to us and show progress on starting the project. But also that we didn't win the Suffolk County award last year. They gave us positive feedback. That's encouraging. But we could potentially wait and not get that a grant award again. So it's not to say that we have the check waiting for us, but that's part of the risk in waiting. And ultimately, that's a decision of the board, how you want to proceed. If you choose to not allocate this funding, then the project would default to seeking additional outside funding so that it could progress.
Thank you.
The other potential grant that we have out there that we could apply for this program is there's also another Suffolk County Soil and Water grant that could cover $50,000, so not the full $65,000, but that's a grant that we would have to put in. It would not allow us to do the project this year either. So it truly does, like, we have potential funding for sources for future years, but it really has to, whether or not we want to proceed this year and look for those funding sources. If we get past the pilot and decide that we need to continue on with the program, we'll be looking for additional funding similar to the amounts that we're outlaying, that we've got this year.
Oh, yeah, because once the pilot's done, isn't there, the rest of the project is $650,000, I think.
About that, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's not even go there yet. Let's-
Right.
That's a whole nother round of funding.
Yes, but I'm just, like, as far as,
Right.
trying to get, do the pilot and then look to the future, just get all the cards on the table.
Joe, could I ask, the $325,000?
Yes.
Where did that number come from?
That's an estimate that I worked up in collaboration with the designer for the cost, for the plans that I have. Did you get the plans, the package, or no?
No, I looked and I didn't see it forward.
I didn't get
Okay,
it.
so there's a full set of plans which were submitted for permits that show the equipment that's used, the layout of the project, and so that price includes the cost of all those materials, the rental of the processing equipment, and some of that price includes infrastructure that could or will carry over into the full-scale project. So the $325,000, I actually have the breakdown here in front of me. About half of that goes towards infrastructure that would be used in the full-scale project.
The pier, the dock, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right.
So actually, the pier is not in the pilot program, but that's a good example of infrastructure costs that are in the full-scale project. So there's no pier.
So that would be involved in the full scale.
That's right. There's no pier involved in the pilot project. All of the filtration equipment will be, sort of palletized, we call it skid mounted, in the shoulder of Fresh Pond Road. And the pipes will extend into Fresh Pond so that it can all be removed afterward. The full-scale project includes the installation of that small pier and platform, which would house the filtration equipment. And when that filtration equipment is no longer needed, the pier would just revert to the ownership of the town, and we could use it as, you could remove it if you chose, but the idea was that it could become part of the pond as a observation deck or a fishing platform or a boat launch or something like that.
Joe,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Albert.
you had indicated at the WQI meeting that you would have to put out an RFP for a contractor to manage this pilot project. Is that,
That's right. And
Yeah, what I-
all the work has to be contracted still, yes.
what is that estimate and cost?
325,000. That's.
That's included in?
Yes.
Oh,
Because
okay.
the total pilot project costs 325.
So you're not putting out an RFP that's already incorporated into the project?
I'm sorry, I don't follow the question.
You're not putting out an RFP for that, the expense of that amount of work, 10 to the pilot project?
The project which will go out to bid is for $325,000.
Okay, all right.
So there's no separate contract for additional amounts of money. 325 is the total cost of the pilot program.
That's a current estimate because that was the number last year as well.
Yeah, we had to look at that again, and that feels, we're still confident in those numbers. Yeah, and I spoke with Ken Lewis. There are a couple of parts of this that we could consider doing in-house as well to help keep costs down. Some, clearing or electrical work. There's some things that we could, help do if that becomes an issue. But right now, that's not the plan. The plan is to contract this as one package.
And I zoomed into the WAC meeting last week, but I also sit on the WMAC. And this plan basically requires a dock.
Not the pilot program,
Of
the full scale program. Yeah.
Has that been discussed with the WMAC?
No, it hasn't been discussed with WMAC, and the dock is not a requirement of the remediation. It's ultimately something that we landed on as a way, based off community feedback, and as a way to minimize any disruptions to pond access. So the pilot program, like I said, will have the filtration system off in the road shoulder, but it's a smaller scale. So it's occupying perhaps, one parking spot equivalent worth of space. But it was important that we kept the whole access of Fresh Pond Road open. It's a fire lane. It's also the public access. So for the pilot program, that wasn't really much of a problem. We had the space to use the road shoulder. For the full-scale effort, the system takes up a little bit more space. And we had looked at using some adjacent lands, or there was a vacant CPF parcel. There's Turpin's Rest Trail. But ultimately, after looking at all those considerations, the best way to keep this out of everybody's hair was to build a platform for it into the pond. So it's not to say that we have to do that. The equipment doesn't require us to do that. But looking at the alternatives, that was something that does drive price, because we have to build that small dock. But the feedback that we got from various stakeholders was that they liked that concept, and there was a lot of interest in having the pier remain part of the town's asset list and to be used for additional enhanced public access to the pond, to turn it into like I said, a observation deck or a kayak launch or something like that.
Got it. Thank you.
But certainly, if that wanted to be revisited, we could do that as a way to control costs. if any of those other alternatives were desirable by the town to, for instance, say, use more of Fresh Pond Road or use one of the CPF sites to hold this equipment. That's something we could conceivably revisit, but, at least initially when we considered that, it wasn't well received and the pier was the preferred option.
The pilot project, one season?
1 season, 3 months.
Season
Yeah.
to get the thresholds, whatever's established.
That's right. And
What are those thresholds, or how do you prove, success or to move forward?
Right.
What is-
so the season is the same. We're limited in how long we can run this equipment because of the dynamic and organic seasonality of the pond. So the phosphorus goes into the lowest portions of the pond water, but it takes time for that to happen. In the fall, when the temperatures cool, the water on the surface of the pond gets exposed to the cooler air temperatures, and then it sinks. And that's the turnover of the water that disturbs where the phosphorus has accumulated. So all winter long, after that turnover in the fall has happened, the water in the bottom portions of the pond generally stays there, and it gathers more and more phosphorus from diffusion during that period. So you don't want to run this equipment in the early fall because there isn't much phosphorus left to take out. So you wait until late spring, early summer, when it's been there for the longest, and then you turn the system on. So that's the 3-month period that we're looking at for the pilot. And that's ultimately the window that we're looking at for the long-term project. We would be doing this whenever that window of high density phosphorus has accumulated, because that's when it makes most sense to filter it. What does success look like? Well, we've already done a lot of legwork in understanding how much phosphorus is available and what the diffusion rates are. We have established goals as to how much phosphorus has to be removed from the pond to eliminate those harmful algae bloom risks. So we have very solid metrics as to what we're working towards. The purpose of the pilot program is largely to understand how effective the filtration unit is with the unique pond chemistry and how much we could expect to see every year removed and how the pond responds in terms of giving up more phosphorus. So the pilot program is not an effort to understand if this works or if it doesn't work. It's more of an effort to understand how well it's working so we know how many years this might take to finish it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if you want, I have specific numbers here. In total, we're looking to remove 125 kilos of phosphorus. So that's at the end of the project. That's what we're trying to take out. And that's a result of sediment testing and the first phase of analysis that we did several years ago to understand why we have water quality problems. The results of that was you have precisely this much extra. So that's a little over 250, 200.
What is the, after jumping ahead, the full project?
Yeah.
How long before phosphorus returns into the pond? Do we know that, or any kind of a conjecture?
The initial analysis concluded that the phosphorus we had, the type and location of it, has accumulated over centuries. So this is considered to be, once you finish this, if you were to finish the long-term project, this is considered to be a fix, for the conceivable future. This is not something we would expect to recur in 5 years or 10 years. This would be something, certainly nobody in this room would have to revisit as a problem. Yeah.
Even Meg?
Yeah. Actually, I didn't even look in the room to see who was here before.
If we were just to do the pilot program and not proceed with the full blown, does that make any dent in the,
It does, yeah, it does. It would be a shame, because that would be money spent and, but the pilot program, is supposed to move about 10%, I believe, of the total. So if we were looking at 125 kilos, we'd be trying to move, I think, about 10 kilos of that in the pilot program. So, if you're looking at this issue as I have 125 that I have to get rid of and I could knock off 10 now, that's progress. I don't know exactly how that plays out in terms of impact. I don't think that there's a direct correlation between severity and frequency of harmful algae blooms and, that degree, 10 kilos. I think you'd still expect to see them occur, but would be making progress towards that ultimate goal, even in the pilot effort.
Is phosphorus the main contributor to the eutrophication of the pond?
Yes, totally. So the phosphorus is a fertilizer, and what's happening in concept is all winter long that phosphorus accumulates in the bottom portions, the depths of the pond, but there's no oxygen down there and there's no sunlight down there. So photosynthesis doesn't occur. There's no real other organic material. We've learned a lot about where to not fish in the pond from doing these studies, because we see where all of the oxygen depleted zones are. But in any case, all that phosphorus accumulates, and when the pond turns over, the phosphorus then goes to the top where it's in an oxygenated environment. The sunshine hits it, and you have it act like a fertilizer, where you see these photosynthetic organisms explode, and that's what creates those harmful conditions. You don't have control necessarily of what type of algae blooms. Sometimes it's a toxic one, sometimes it's a naturally occurring one, but it occurs at an abundance that's detrimental to the pond. But that's the function that's causing the water quality degradation. And then that algae, as it's in overabundance, eventually starts to decompose, and the decomposition process sucks up all the remaining oxygen in the water. It's very much the same process we have in our tidal creeks and estuaries of overabundance of algae from excess nutrients. It's just happening in the freshwater environment, and it's happening kind of in a more closed environment. There's no tidal flushing to remove this water to help mitigate that. This is a relatively contained system.
You may not know the answer to this question, but let's say we go ahead with this now for the spring, and we apply for the Suffolk County grant. Could that be applied back, or is once we pay for it, we're done, and we just go forward?
I won't say with certainty, but I'm pessimistic that would be the case. If you're going to continue to apply for extra funding like the county this summer, and you were to move forward with this request now, this summer's application with the county would probably be best suited for the following, full scale effort to subsidize that. I don't believe that they allow you to backdate those, particularly because the whole thing would happen before we even understood if we won the grant. We typically don't even find out till the fall from the county if we got the award that we applied for that summer. And this project would be wrapped up by then. So it'd be a pretty hard argument, I think. But that's a good question for Jennifer, the grants.
I asked that question this morning about the soil and water grant, and that one you could not apply for it at the end of this month and have it applied to this summer, because it's not decided upon until after the project's done. So I presume, since the other one was a county grant too, probably submit. So
Sure, just so I understand, the issue that came up originally was over nitrates. When I say came up, the issue of the septics around the pond came up, okay, and I think at that time, correct me if I'm mistaken, is that the nitrates had no impact on the pond. Is that correct still?
I don't want to say no impact, but the nitrates were not the cause of the harmful algae blooms that we're seeing.
I recall something along those lines, though, where wasn't there we don't want the surrounding properties to change what's nitrates flowing in, because we want to keep status quo,
That's right.
the chemical makeup of the pond right now.
Yes, the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus inputs is very relevant to how the algae responds with its uptake. So the installation of IA systems for all of the adjacent pond users would reduce the nitrogen content of their wastewater, but it would not impact their phosphorus. And that imbalance could actually worsen the conditions. And so it's not to say that as a township, we wouldn't want to recommend those types of wastewater upgrades. We just want to make sure that those homeowners are considering phosphorus reducing systems, because that's what would have the most impact as opposed to nitrogen reducing systems. Some of those are in testing with the county for approval, but they're not widely available phosphorus reducing systems. Some of them are add-ons to existing systems. Some of them are self-contained phosphorus treating systems, but ultimately that's the type that we would want in the freshwater watershed application.
So would I be correct that the cesspools that currently are leaching into the pond are desirable?
I don't want to go so far.
What I'm saying, I'm presenting it in a different way because you're saying you need it in order for it to balance. So you would, if you put IAs in or they did something different, it would not be desirable.
Certainly, one or two IA systems in the area are likely not to create any sort of negative impact. But when we're discussing what's an appropriate application for all of these homeowners, we shouldn't be rushing to have them install IA systems. We really need them to install systems that have phosphorus reducing capabilities, and they're not widely available right now. I know the public had a call for saying, hey, why aren't these, if the town is considering spending this money for water quality improvement, why isn't the equal expectation that these homeowners have to install these systems? And I follow that logic, and I think that's totally appropriate. But those systems need to be the right kind. We've gone through the hassle for studying, and we have the benefit of knowing exactly what our problem is. That information should be incorporated into our approach and policy for the kinds of septic treatment we do in that area. IA systems are always an improvement, but in this particular case, it's likely not the best choice for this application if it doesn't have the phosphorus reducing component to it.
After the phosphates are eliminated, after this program is in place for the 7 or 8 years that you're talking about, then does nitrate reduction play a role in the pond?
Nitrate reduction will always play a role, but honestly, in 7 years, I would think that the availability of those phosphorus reducing systems would be integrated with existing nitrogen reducing systems. And it's not necessarily one or the other. I'm not advocating don't do a current Fuji nitrogen reducing system because you should hold off for a phosphorus one. We want to do both, but the current equipment only focuses on nitrogen right now, and we need to make sure that we can add in the phosphorus treatment as well. So in no situation would I say you only need the phosphorus one. You want to capture both. You just need to make sure you're doing it at the right balance, including the phosphorus.
If I'm not mistaken, initially when this is the Lombardo system that we're working with, right? That this is the same. The system you're talking about is that engineering that came from Lombardo. Is that correct?
They are the designer, but if it's not the Nitrex wastewater.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But the engineering came
The
from.
engineering is the same. The engineering consultant is the same. Yes.
And again, the alternative to this pilot program, just so I'm just refreshing my memory, was aeration. Is that correct?
That's right.
And we decided not to use aeration because of the time frame and how long it would take to work. Is that correct? Or it took a longer time?
It would never remediate the situation. It's a perpetual effort. So in the oxygenation option, you would have to perpetually oxygenate so that the phosphorus would not leach from the sediment. That's the mechanism that oxygenation provides. You insert oxygen through bubbler systems, and the oxygenation prevents the phosphorus from coming out of the sediment. So you restore the pond quality. In some cases, you really improve the pond quality because you're oxygenating in areas that had never been, so you'd expect to see a resurgence of life. But once you turn off the machine, the phosphorus would begin leaching out again. So it's a commitment indefinitely to providing that
I guess the hard part that I have with understanding the system, when I was reading and watching what was going on over with the town of East Hampton or Southampton, worked with Dr. Gobler on Georgia Pond.
Yes.
And they worked with aeration, and one of the things that they did initially is that before they moved forward, they insisted that the homeowners around the pond, his first part was everybody had to put an IA system in. And it's, it's a little odd because we're talking about, we want the nitrate, the nitrates help with this particular system, and yet over in the South Shore, they worked with cleaning up the septics around the pond and used aeration, and yet we're talking that maybe it's not such a good idea initially for anybody to put IA systems in because it might interfere with the removal of the phosphates. It just seems like there's two different systems here that we're talking about, and I don't know really what the difference is, okay? And
I can answer those questions for you. The first thing about the nitrates is I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that the nitrates are good. That's not the case here. It's just that in studying what the contributing factors were for the pond's water quality degradation and understanding what the septic influence was, we understood that the septic influence was very low, and that the reason we're experiencing water quality problems is not because of the quantity of wastewater flow that's generated in the area. So we know that to be a relatively small contributing factor. The other thing that's different about Georgia Pond is the depth and the type of issue that we're dealing with. Georgia Pond, for instance, one of the techniques that they're using to help remove nutrients is that they've invested in they bought their own weed vegetation harvesting machine. So we have done that a little bit as well, but the vegetation doesn't propagate in deep water ponds because it only grows in the shallow waters where it can sprout to the surface and engage with the bottom for root structure. So we have removed some vegetation as a way to get those nutrients out of the pond, but our pond is very deep and we don't have widespread vegetation. It just accumulates in the shallow areas. Georgia Pond, it's much shallower and the vegetation often covers, large swaths of it. So investing in a machine that you can run all summer and pull that material out is an effective way for them to remove the nutrients. So the point I want to drive home is that the ponds are different geologically, and so the approaches are a little bit different geologically. The approaches for remediation are a bit different as well.
You had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say that essentially we're being asked to use WQI funds to fund half of the shortfall, right? Because the Fresh Pond neighbors were going to do the other half.
32,500.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm.
And the backdrop to that is, last year, they gave me a letter saying that they would fund the shortfall.
Right.
And again, if this was the last stop on the train, like if they applied for New York and got it, they applied for county and got it, and there was still a shortfall, then I'd be 100% sympathetic. But this doesn't seem to be the last stop on the train, and there seems to be a piece missing.
Well, this is also not the last step of the project.
Right.
If we decide to move on and do the even larger scale, full remediation, then we're going to be asking them for more money. So I feel like this is kind of a fair split. And then if we apply for more grants, there's always a match to some of those grants. And if we get the county and the state and it still doesn't cover 100%, we're still going to need to go out and see if they'll help us continue to fund. So I feel like, this is kind of a good faith gesture, splitting it, we're moving forward, and then that there may be a bigger ask down the line if we figure out how to do the complete project.
One way to look at it.
It's been going on so long, I'd like to see it actually, I'd like to start the pilot.
And I really prefer not to be involved in the relationship between the town and the neighbors association. Because certainly that's not my role here in presenting the project. But I just would add that the Fresh Pond neighbors have paid for other things as part of the wheat vegetation harvesting last year. So I'm sure that they would advocate for that. They have contributed in those ways. But I have nothing before me that memorializes this arrangement whatsoever. So that's something that the town would have to formally engage with the association to finalize what that partnership would look like.
Joe, does the water flow that goes from Fresh Pond into Menantic Creek, what's the impact?
So we know that from our initial study that groundwater flows into Fresh Pond from the larger main aquifer and then continues through the groundwater flow from Fresh Pond, goes to both Menantic and Dickerson Creek. It's about a 60-40 split. So groundwater enters Fresh Pond with, its inherent characteristics of the aquifer, but then it's, enhanced, manipulated, evolved as it's in the pond, and then continues down gradient into those creeks. So certainly if that groundwater is carrying additional nutrients, we would expect that it's having a negative impact on those creeks as well. That, however, has not been formally studied other than the transportation path and the water quality of the pond. So we're just concluding that that's a negative impact to those creeks based on the data that we have from the pond itself. And from what I recall, I think it's about 400,000 gallons per day goes into the pond, 400,000 gallons per day via groundwater exits, and it's about a 60-40 split. So the influence to those creeks, is about 250,000 gallons, 300,000 gallons piece respectively.
So if you move ahead with the pilot project, and let's assume everything works correctly, and we don't get grant funding for the next year, what happens then? When you do finally get granting, let's assume you skipped a year and you couldn't do something.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Do you just pick up from where you left off, or does it go back to zero?
It's kind of a herky-jerky process because some grants require you have an approved permit in hand to even apply for funds. Some grants don't.
Right.
So we only have, for instance, the permit in hand for the pilot program. The DEC came to us and said, we'd like for you to try this at a smaller scale, and then we'll issue you a separate permit for your full scale. That same grant that DEC issues us for this project, currently pilot, requires permit in hand. So we can't even apply for the permit for full scale until we finish pilot scale. But the county grant, which would become available this summer, does not require you to have the full permit in hand. So we could go this summer and say we'd like $250,000 towards the full-scale project, and they could conceivably approve it even though we don't have a permit in hand. So when you line all these things up in terms of the schedule, if you skip this year with the pilot, you potentially delay, 2 years before you could start the full scale, because then you have to start the full-scale permit process before you could reapply for the same state funding for the full scale. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not a linear schedule. There's a lot of variables, but conceivably you could pull this off this summer, and conceivably you could start the full scale next year. That's the most.
Will there be
optimistic
any
bet.
noticeable difference in Menantic Creek or in Dickerson Creek if in fact Fresh Pond were clean? Or had no algae blooms or something to that extent?
Qualitatively, yes, you would be improving all of the conditions that would lead to, potentially a water quality issue. But there are so many other factors that I think on a given year, it'd be impossible to predict, whether you saw something negative happen or not. But just like with the ponds improvement, we would be looking at this as a trend. So we would expect to see over the next 5 years, less harmful algal blooms, less frequent, less intense. But you may still have one in year 3, you may not have one. May not have one in year 2, but then you have another one in year 3. But the trend would be you're working towards, zero.
The algae blooms are primarily in that one what is it, the southwest corner, I guess? Is that what it is?
Yeah, they tend to happen through, because it's a relatively small pond, they tend to be throughout. Some things are a little different, like we have some of those harmful vegetation outbreaks, they tend to happen in the shallow areas, and they tend to happen right by the end of Fresh Pond Road. Sometimes we see like a blue-green algae outbreak, but that's not necessarily tied to a specific area. Sometimes we see it on the south end, sometimes on the north end. So it depends on what kind of negative impact you're talking.
Any other questions, Joe? So the question before us is, do we want to, the process, let me go through process first. First, because this is not part of the IA program and we're wanting to use funds from WQI, we would have to set a public hearing and then have a public hearing in April to see whether or not the public thinks that this is a good utilization of funds. And then Joe would be back and answer any questions that the public has. Then if we decide to proceed after that public hearing, which we have a short window, so we'd almost, if we didn't hear anything from the public that, greatly influenced us that night, either pass the resolution that night, because you then have to put out an RFP for a bid. And so if we are doing this in early April, then it would be a month before you would get those bids back. So we have a very short window, of how this can move forward. So that's one of our considerations. So do we want to try and see if we can potentially make this happen? And we also have to get the contract from the county, for the state, the DEC. So there's a couple of moving parts where this may not happen. So do we want to try and make this happen utilizing $32,500 of WQI money? If it doesn't happen, then we can still proceed with looking for the grant applications for the other two. Although I guess we have to think about timing of when those applications go in. I think it would be too late for the soil and water grant, but we wouldn't be too late for applying back for the county grant that we didn't get last year. In which case, the timing of other things could push this off. So it's really, that's kind of what path do we want to take?
What money has the town invested so far into fresh pond remediation?
The total scale, I don't have.
Right, I mean, up to this moment of time, okay?
Yeah, I'd have to dig on that. There's been so many phases of this project. Just organizationally, we did the initial analysis, which was to understand what the problem was. That project was grant funded, or mostly grant funded. Then we did Then we did the design of this system. That was funded by the town through WQI funds. And now we're pursuing phase one, construction and remediation. And that is, at least at present, 75% outside funded. And we're trying to shore up well, actually it's more than that. I guess it's 75 plus another 12.5. So we're seeking 12.5% out of the WQI funds towards this phase one project. So $32,000 in this ask. So.
But the earlier Fresh Pond grant that was funded from WQI monies was $154,500.
Right.
That was for the designs
That was for this study.
of the study.
The design, yeah, that's for the design.
Design assistant.
Yeah, 154 was paid by who?
WQI.
So, right, so it's really town money, okay, that's what I'm gonna find out.
And I don't.
And I do not believe that there was anything that came out of
No.
the operating budget, just WQI. And there was
that's
also
right.
money, I think that, I can't remember, was there a little bit that was funded by Fresh Pond Neighbors?
Yes,
About
indeed.
40 or 50,000.
Yeah.
Yes, in the initial study, the balance, the match contributions of the initial study were paid by the Fresh Pond members. So I don't believe there were any out-of-pockets on the first effort. The second effort was purely town. And now this third effort is somehow. Aside from all of the, I mean, the town's also committed resources to this that are, uncaptured in this, town personnel and things like that.
So we've already heavily invested in this.
Sorry?
We've already heavily invested in this.
Yes. Well, it's 150, that's WQIP, and the committee has, again, I didn't listen to it, so they have made a recommendation. Their committee is all on board with investing this money there. Okay, so out of WQIP, before you go into the next step, you will, they will have already committed 180 some odd, $190,000. Just how to use it, right, which is not out of the tax base, it's out of the WQIP, the freshwater park, okay? You've answered all the questions for me, I have no more.
So if we want to go the route of using WQI money, we have to go public hearing.
Yes, we would set a public hearing on March 17th, next Monday, and have the public hearing on April 7th.
And the actual timing of all that may make us miss it, make us miss some of the hurdles.
If there's a public outcry to not proceed with this, just, to not spend the $32,500, then we wouldn't want to make a decision on April 7th. We'd want to kick it to a work session.
Yep.
And decide from there. And then also whether or not the contract gets executed.
Yeah, we're operating on the assumption that the state will finish the contract as they had indicated they would. And then if the town's portion of this project was decided on that schedule, then we would be fine for executing. But if the town had, injected a few weeks to deliberate, then potentially the bidding process would be delayed. I can't issue a bid, even if we're not going to accept a bid. I can't in good faith issue a bid if we haven't reasonably secured the money to do the project. So, I would wait till we had clarity from the town board as to whether the funding would be available.
So with the grant, so the town, would they have to lay the money out for that first, the 260,000, then
Yes.
be reimbursed?
The grant's all reimbursable.
Or reimbursable? How long does it take to get for reimbursable?
These grants are pretty swift, and that's something that the grants manager, Jennifer Messiano, manages for us. It's typically reimbursed on a quarterly process, so whatever our billables were for that quarter, we would submit. And I mean, it takes several months, but compared to the meeting we had earlier.
Yeah, that's right, I'm thinking about how they.
No.
I'll go over 5 years later, okay.
Totally different, yeah.
No, they're pretty decent with that kind of turnaround. And sometimes, for instance, if we had, very few billables for the quarter, we wait for the sake of minimizing the paperwork and the request to the following quarter. So it's a worthwhile expense. Yeah, but generally they're pretty responsive.
The Lombardo, will there be other fees for that engineering firm as we go along here?
Just to conclude the analysis and the results of the
Of the
project.
phase?
Yeah, exactly. So,
What about in the future?
well, we have the plans, so that design phase is closed.
Who evaluates that as we go along?
We have it should be them, in my opinion, because they've done the work thus far and they're capable, but we have no commitment to them to do that. Yeah.
I'm in favor of trying to move forward with this summer, knowing that, if we miss the deadlines, then we just don't expend the money from WQI. It's kind of a no harm, no foul. We can try for the goal. If we don't make the goal, we don't spend the money and we try in the next cycle. Anybody else think?
Some of the things that I always look at, it's with grants, okay, or WQIP, it's interesting, we look at their funds in a little different way, meaning it's not like it's taxpayer money, it's coming from another source. But I guess I asked the question is, how would we look at it any differently if we were asking the taxpayers to pay the bill? Would we look at this whole program different if it was really individually affect, that we didn't have it, would we look at it any differently?
I
Would you
think-
still be, well, maybe we should go, we shouldn't go, would we look at it any differently?
I don't think we should look at it differently because it's still money that we have to apply to town problems.
I agree. Well, I'm putting it in a different perspective so that it's not, and when you look at WQIP money, it's funds that are there, okay, for water quality, there's no question about that, okay? It's just that it's when when we talk, the taxpayer is really not paying for it, okay? Because it's coming out of WQIP funds, but that's why I posed the question that if it was coming out of the general fund, would you look at it any differently?
Well, it doesn't come out of thin air.
Right, okay.
I would look at it differently. I would definitely look at it differently because this would be something that we're putting on the taxpayers that we would have to raise taxes for. This money, this is a revenue source that was set up and voted on by the public for specifically open preservation and water quality. So it's a funding source that we don't have control over. So the funds have been made available for just these types of projects. So you're comparing apples and oranges with that statement.
Well, I'm not really, because I think when you look at it, you say, well, what is the best use of your fund base? Okay, I guess that's really what it boils down to. And even with water quality of WQIP money, it just brings the question, if this is the right, if we feel this strongly that this is really has the most impact, you go along with it. Okay, if you felt maybe there were other things that were more, had higher priority with a dollar commitment, which is what this is all about, okay, you might look at it differently. So that's the only thing. I'm just throwing it out, that's all.
So the WQI has $3 billion in it,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
So-
$3 million, it's not.
That's not allocated for something specific.
Correct.
So I think 32,500 of that,
Is
Is not-
1%.
yeah, it's not going to have a significant enough impact on the overall balance to make it so that other projects aren't possible. And this money is specifically allocated for this purpose.
Yeah, it is less than 2 IA systems.
Right. And it will have an impact greater than 2 IA systems when it's all said and done.
Yeah, right.
Can I ask a question? Since I think I heard that in the event the town decides to proceed with this project, that there's some time pressure. I just want to make sure that you're not under the impression that you need to wait until a regular board meeting to schedule the public hearing. A public hearing can be scheduled at a work session.
Yeah, and my preference is to try and adhere to public hearings being on the Monday nights in the regular course of business, just because that's the expectation of the public, that these are when these events will happen. So as much as possible, I always try and adhere to that schedule. We get better input. Greater participation.
So what does
Supervisor
everybody
say,
think?
Albert, you haven't chimed in.
Basically, the question is, do we want to have a public hearing on this?
Yeah,
That's
it's not even
What-
deciding, it's just, do you want to
What
have?
do you think, Ann?
I would say proceed with the public hearing. WQI has said that they think this is a useful expenditure of these funds and to proceed.
I'm not going to hold up the decision here. I would like to see the information that you have, Joe. You know, whatever you have on it. I'd like to see, yeah,
Sure, I'll leave you with a copy.
yeah, if you would.
Yeah.
That, you know,
And if we set the public hearing, we can post that information on the website too, so that the public, besides having the resolution to potentially expend the funds, this will be the backup discussion documents.
let's schedule the public hearing. Get public input on this. I mean, I'd like to hear from the public
Yeah.
before we
Yeah.
decide
Yeah, we're
on.
not
Even
making
though
a
it's
decision today, we're just
a
making.
different fund, I'd rather hear from the public on this. I think that's only fair.
I agree.
Yes, I agree. Also want to correct something that I said before. The commitment that the WAC made to me about this issue,
WAC or Fresh Pond
sorry,
Neighbors?
the Fresh Pond Neighbors. And, but, you know, most of them are on WAC. Is that if there is a shortfall, that they would certainly endeavor to raise at least half.
Mhm. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's what they've done.
yeah, that's what I remembered the agreement being.
I just heard it as all.
Selective hearing.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so Stephen will have to work on that, pulling that resolution to set the public hearing together for Monday night's meeting, please.
Monday, when?
Monday night's meeting.
The
I
17th.
mean, the 17th, March 17th
17th.
is our next town board meeting.
Will do.
Does anybody else want a paper copy of the plans? I have a copy here.
Wait,
Okay, I'll just go make a couple cents and then I'll leave them with you. So you have to.
Take one.
3, 4,
I'll just do a whole set.
Do a whole.
5. All
Five.
right. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Great presentation, Joe.
Okay, our next agenda item is business on town properties. And Meg is going to run point on this. We're not talking about the actual applicants themselves.
Yeah.
We're just talking about refreshing on what business on town property is and some of the parameters and questions and considerations. So, go.
So I gave everybody 2 handouts. One is chapter 36 beaches and parks. The other one is outdoor assembly application and process. I gave you guys both of them because they often get confused because they're similar. It's people doing things on public property. The first one, the business on town properties, the chapter 36, it comes from the beaches and parks section of the code. It's a very short section of code. If you flip to the second page, this is different in that we tend to look at all of the applications for business on town property once. So these are for reoccurring businesses throughout the summer, you know, like Mr. Softy or the massage tent at the beach or the food trucks at Wade's Beach. So all applicants have a deadline of March 31st to get their applications into us. And then we review them and we decide who is going to be allowed to have a business on town property. A lot of the policy that we've put in place in the past has been incorporated into the application. So as you look through the application, you'll notice towards the bottom of the first page, the nature of the business, and it has, you know, a review of the guidelines. Retail is not permitted on town beaches. We made that policy a few years ago when someone wanted to sell handbags, like people selling tchotchkes and things like that. It's not really what we want on the beaches. The town tends to give a priority to brick and mortar. And if we have competing businesses of the same kind, then we'll take an RFP and decide between the 2 businesses. Then if you go to page 2, there is a section right under the long line by the top where it says Wade's Beach has 2 business limit with a 20 by 20 area, which includes a maximum tent size of 10 by 10, and duplication of services will not be permitted. And you're not allowed to use the pavilion for your business on town property. And then at Crescent Beach, we've set a business limit of 5 businesses on the beach with a 20 by 20 area, which includes a maximum tent size of 10 by 10. And we also won't allow duplicate services. So these are policies that the town has developed over time, and we've incorporated them into the application so that people are aware of them when they apply.
I guess the world isn't so simple because, we have K-pops and Mr. Softy. Are they competing? Are they not? Are they complementary?
Right, and so that's why I'm going over it all, so that when we review these applications,
Yeah.
we have it fresh in our minds. We also have a policy, if you go down to the bottom of that, for parking. That, one, they have to show us their parking plan, where they plan on parking, and they have to have like a beach sticker if they're going to be parking in a parking spot. We don't issue free parking for them. So there's just a couple of those policy questions that we do have incorporated into the application. Then there are some questions that we should kind of brainstorm and address ourselves. So, for example, if we want to give priority to last year's businesses, are the existing brick and mortars being negatively impacted by some of these businesses on town property? And then the process that we've used to review the business on town property applications was one in which all the board members look at all the applications, and then we have the people who are presenting come and talk to us about their business, how they plan on running it, what they are looking to do, and then we as a board decide on what businesses to allow on what beaches and what their parameters are and restrictions. So that's how we've done it in the past. So what we need to decide is that the way we would like to continue doing it? And then, so that's one aspect of it. And then the other one is the outdoor assembly permit applications. So these are a little different. They trickle in all summer long, all season, really. So, there are some that we know we can anticipate every year, like the Chamber of Commerce Craft Fair, the Easter egg hunt, the Historic Society has their play, the 10K, Snapper Derby, things like that. So the way we've handled these, because they have slightly different requirements, is that we created kind of a subcommittee to go over them that consisted of the police chief, superintendent of highways, the town clerk, and one board member. And that was kind of the subgroup, because you want police chief to talk about if it's going to have any impact on traffic. You want highway to see if there's a trash issue or anything like that. Town board member to help present it back to the town board, and then the town clerk because she does all the correspondence. So we created that subcommittee, and in the past, it's been very helpful because we get a lot of applications that don't actually rise to the level of either requiring a permit for outdoor assembly. They don't qualify, so maybe they're trying to request a noise exemption, but they're not a charity, so then they automatically get denied. We won't, issue a noise exemption unless you're a charitable organization. And then there are policies in this. So if you go to page 2 of the application for outdoor assembly, there's a couple policies that have been put into the application. So the first is the exemption or town services being requested. So if they're requesting a noise exemption, we wrote in here that it has to be a charitable event and it has to be a registered tax exempt organization. So that's actually, and then we cite the section of code so that people applying understand that. And then if you go down towards the bottom where it says special notes, there are certain things that we do discourage between Memorial Day and Labor Day, such as activities that involve erection of dance floors, tents, arches greater than 100 square feet, fence or other structures on town beaches. So during the peak summer season, we don't want private events on public beaches because it takes away from the public's ability to use the beaches. Same thing for private concert shows, dances, or staging areas for walkathons, marathons, or bike races. We try to keep those things off of the beaches during the summer season. So those are policies that we have put into place. And then you can see the third page of that packet is the outdoor assembly review sheet. So when we receive an outdoor assembly application, this is the sheet we go through to make sure that it's complete and that everything has been considered before it gets presented to the board for review or gets denied because maybe it doesn't meet the criteria to warrant a permit. So those are kind of the two types of applications that we're going to be seeing. The first one that we've had a few outdoor assembly applications already trickle in. So one of the questions is, do we want to continue the subcommittee for outdoor assembly permits to initially vet the applications before they come to the town board? And if so, who would like to be the town board?
That's some subcommittee, it applies to the both of these or
No,
just for the outdoor?
assembly.
Got it, okay.
Well, man, one thing it might be good to get some clarity on is, what's the initial trigger for this outdoor assembly? Is it more than 50 people?
No, it's if they want to use any town resources or services. So if they're going to need help coordinating parking, if they're going to create some kind of traffic flow issue because they're going to have a lot of people coming to the event. So for example, the Historical Society, when they do the play, they come to us for a noise exemption because it's going to be loud and they might need help with parking and coordinating traffic. The 10K comes to us because it takes up a whole bunch of the island's resources. You have the PD, you have highway helping.
And I guess in the flip example is the Sylvester Manor Gala every summer doesn't require any town resources. It's all on the property.
Correct.
Doesn't need a noise exemption because it's in the middle of the property. Nobody can hear it.
Right.
Okay.
And so, we like getting those applications, even though we may say no permit required, just so that the PD can put it on their calendar and know that it's happening, just so that they're aware of it. So, it's never a bad idea to send us your application, even if you may not require a permit. But that's kind of where that working group comes in handy, because then they can just vet them and say, yeah, you don't need a permit, or you do, or this is what's missing from your application, can make it more complete, and then we'll bring it to the board for review. So we should set that up sooner rather than later, because we are starting to receive some applications. Yes.
I mean, I think we should have the subcommittee. Weren't you the liaison last year?
I was.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to continue doing it if that's helpful. I don't mind. Because we do have a few applications already. But unless someone else would like to do
Any
it.
other volunteers?
Thank you, go for it.
All right, so that's outdoor assembly. That's done.
All right, that one's an easier one.
So then just the business on town property. We do need to think through some of these. I don't think we've received all of the applications that we typically do by this time. I know Amber has reached out to people who have had business on town property in the past to let them know that the deadline is the 31st, and that if they have something that if they have a business they want to run, they need to get her an application. But I don't think that she's received a bunch of them. I think I've only seen 3.
Yeah, she's on, I don't know, she wants to let us know, because I feel like something else might have just come in.
Mr. Softy, Trent,
Yeah, we've seen Trent and Mr. Softy, and
So far, I've only received 3.
all right. So Trent, Mr. Softy, and the launch service, I believe, are the
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, having been through it last year, I'm not sure how you add more guidelines, because some situations are so unique. Like the problem we had last year with the 2 food trucks
I-
parking.
Yes, battle of the food trucks.
You can't have a guideline for that. You have to go down there and say, you park here and you park over there.
Right.
Oh, yeah, the ice cream truck and the food truck.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, just food for thought, if anyone had any recommendations or things they wanted to incorporate or, but that's just typically the process that we use to vet these.
I can't.
Why don't we consider raising the fee?
What's the fee right now?
250?
250?
And we get how many, like 8?
Maybe 7.
So, yeah, so.
I mean, it's definitely not a significant income stream for
Yeah.
us,
Less
that's
than
for sure.
$2,000.
I think it also kind of depends on the business. I think some businesses definitely make more than others by being on town.
If we raise the fee, if we're considering raising the fee, do we have to have a public hearing on it?
I don't think
I
so.
do not believe so. I think it's
Because
just by
it would be
resolution.
nice to get that out before people apply that they.
It's by resolution, but I think you should wait if you're going to raise it until next year. 'Cause it's not really fair to raise it 20 days before the deadline.
Fair enough.
Steve, you were going to say something?
Right, there's a concept of, there's a doctrine of legislative equivalence. If you want to change something, you have to change it with the same degree of formality with which it was originally established. So if the fees were set by local law, then they get changed by local law. If they were set by resolution, they need to be changed by resolution.
By the
And
way,
also, I assume that you require insurance from
Yes.
parties doing business. Okay.
Yes, and actually, the vendors, the businesses who have been doing business in the past had hoped that we could move the application deadline up to like February 28th. But part of the problem was they weren't able to get their certificates of insurance that far in advance and therefore needed to wait to March 31st, so.
How does everybody feel about the size of the space, 20 by 20 on the beach?
We ran into a bit of a problem last year with the massage guy.
Yeah, because he was putting his
Yeah, he had his space, but he was
his
putting
trunk
his
outside.
equipment outside of
And we
his.
said, no, you got to fit it back in.
Right.
But
Well, the conflict was he gets a 20 by 20 area, but a 10 by 10 tent.
Mhm.
So as long as his 20 by 20 area is encompassing all of his things, he's not going outside of that, we determined it was okay in the end.
Mhm.
But there are some people who do spread out beyond their 20 by 20 area. And I think part of what we need to do is kind of really formalize who's going to be responsible for enforcement of that. I think it kind of makes sense to have the police department be responsible since they're walking the beach all day, so they can see when things are expanding beyond their scope. But,
But it's also,
But you know
it's
what-
more code enforcement, not police law, so.
yeah, but they're still code enforcers. I feel like if you give them the resolution, everybody's in this designated space, it's easier for them to say, come on, buddy.
we also don't want to give them.
What are you
impression
saying,
that
the
this is a
police-
Huge problem.
Well, it's not.
We had one
It's not a
guy
huge problem.
last year.
No, but I think, consistent follow-up and just knowing, oh, that's the guy who's gonna tattle on me every time he walks by is helpful.
And you saying police officer or TCO?
Well, the TCO would let whoever's on duty know.
Okay.
It wouldn't be the TCO. I don't think they have the jurisdiction or authority to do that, but they would just report to whoever's on duty. That might just be an efficient way to do it. Trying to have code enforcement go out, just.
I'm surprised you don't have more people, because when you really look at the $250 for a 20 by 20 space on a beach, and if you had 10 weeks, it's $25 a week. It's really, I mean, I'm surprised that you're not inundated with applications.
But if you're giving like $200 massages, sure, it's not a problem, but if you're selling frozen juice pops,
Yeah.
the businesses are so wide-ranging
Mhm.
that you would have to have some sort of scaled fee. And who wants to enforce that?
That might be a good conversation to have pre-budget season. Like if you're taking up the 20 by 20 space, your fee is this. And if you're a mobile little,
Parking spot here.
yeah. Yeah.
Is Chief Reed on?
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Mhm.
Chief Reed, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I was just wondering, with the Marine Patrol, specifically on Crescent Beach, what's the impact on police with all the boats and everything else in the launch service? Is there, does that entail anything from you folks, or have you had issues that you care to share during the season? Like,
Yeah, so operationally, largely on the weekends, we have two boats on the water. One primarily stays on that north side of the island between Crescent Beach and Deering Harbor, North Ferry Channel. That is a busy area, as you suggest, during on Saturdays and Sundays. with anchoring on the outside waters. There are some jurisdictional restrictions that we can't necessarily apply to our outside waters for moorings, but it's a plus and a minus, so to speak. While there's a lot of boats there, that launch does a tremendous job for us in keeping them all, out of the swim area, out of largely the public area, and creates a shuttle service to the beach that's controlled and Coast Guard licensed operators. So there's a plus to that. When our Bay constables can't be in that area, there's also a plus to having them as our eyes and ears, as points of contact. So I'm going to say they've been over there well over 10 years, probably close to 20, and we've created a working relationship with them, to help establish guidelines and keep the boats in certain areas and work with us in trying to keep that somewhat organized. It's a busy beach, July and August, and it's a busy waterway, July and August. I'm not going to discount that in any regard. But Steven's on. Steven, you might be able to speak to regulating the outside waters, not our inland waterways. I do think that they're going to have the right. I don't know that we can code adopt the anchorage area in the outside waters. I think it's in our inland waterways.
I think that's correct.
So Councilman, we're largely stuck with what we got. We're trying to manage it to the best of our ability.
Chief, does the use of the launch help minimize the amount of dinghies we have coming in and out of that area trying to drop people off?
Yes, and I probably didn't articulate that well. That was also part of what I was trying to describe with that launch service. There is a benefit to us in boater safety ramifications by having them there.
Swimmer safety.
Yeah.
Safety, it's a host of things. Now, look, it's not to say that people can't drop their anchor properly and the boat anchors break away from bang up against the docks. I mean, there's just so many things that go with that. It's a love hate.
Losing volume.
I'm sorry about that. It might be the connection. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim, did the seaplanes still come in at that shoreline?
Yes. Yep, the seaplane lands in the outside waters. In essence, he's a boat when he's on the water and has to operate in a similar fashion. But the shuttle does go out to the seaplane when it's in operation to pick people up.
Now, there's theoretically a speed limit there in that channel. How much is it?
I believe the max speed limit is 40 miles per hour.
Which is less than what the seaplane needs to take off. So,
I don't know.
interesting.
Transfers over to a plane at that point.
Yeah. So as the pontoon lifts out of the water, it's okay.
All right.
Well, Southfield has a code where they don't let seaplanes over on their side. They have a,
But I mean, that's something that we need to address in a different fashion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Yeah.
And is it, I don't know, is it really a nuisance? I don't know.
Only when they pull up on the beach.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're not doing that.
No,
They did it once. Yeah.
never again.
Meg, I just wanted to, one of the things that I talked to you about, maybe a few others, was setting up the business on the property, right? And at that point, establishing those guidelines in those areas that you guys already talked about. I think that pre-season setup and sending that message is pretty important. That everybody wants to expand their envelope, so to speak, and by mid-season that can change, and we can follow up on that as you have stated. But I do think, and I don't think it should be our department in establishing the location So if we say this is your location, this is your, a 20 by 20 area and benchmarking that so that it stays that way for the season. And, I believe Ken Lewis is on Public Works. I don't know if he's going to be the person, but somebody should really establish that clearly.
I think, yeah,
I was gonna say, I think Department of Public Works should be that, because it impacts, where, when they're doing the beach raking and cleanup and things like that.
And I think last year we tried to define that more clearly in the resolutions. We tried to give them more specific parameters to what was allowed and where their location was. So we can try to do that again this year. Maybe even measuring, so many feet down from the edge of the walkway or something. Come up with like an actual set dimension to it. We can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Or even, 50 feet from staircase number 2. That's where you start setting up and you have, from that side over or something. We can figure that out. We have the power. Alright, so these are the guidelines with which we will review the applications that come in by March 31st.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so we've got, like, the ones that we have in here delineated. Is there anything else that we want to add? I mean, I guess it's too late for this year's application, but do we want to give priority to last year's businesses?
And those are kind of policy decisions that we can
Yeah,
make.
that's something we just do on the fly at
Right.
the table here.
Yeah.
The maximum number of businesses by location and in total.
And we kind of have that kind of established. It's 5 max at Crescent, 2 max at Wades Beach is kind of what we set in the past. So if we're comfortable with that moving forward, then that's.
I mean, didn't we have some sort of rotating system with ice cream trucks at Wade's and?
Which it was.
Yeah, yeah.
We tried it. We were trying to be diplomatic, and I feel like it just complicated the situation. So we just need to.
It's not gonna be
one
this year. I
or
mean,
the
unless we get a new application, I don't think we're gonna have a.
I don't think we're going to have that conflict.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
What about the fees for next year? Is that something to be considered, changing the fee?
Yeah, in the fall, we
Right.
need to talk about it.
We should
I
have
think
that.
I think that's been talked about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we need to put it
Each
on.
year, then
Yeah,
it comes
I
up
was gonna
and it's like, well, we can't do it this year. I think it's
say, yeah, set it up as an agenda item,
What do you think it should be?
twice what it is now anyway. $250.
I think there should be
Nick,
some
what do you think?
sort of complicated scale program we should talk about. So like some of the businesses
Yeah.
aren't high volume, let's just say that, while others are. And that would affect how the fee impacts their business.
That's, I don't know, then that's delineating a whole accommodation. I don't know if we really want to do that. I don't know.
It'll be complicated. It won't be easy.
Do we want to have a fee structure for existing brick and mortar businesses that's different from?
Well, we're already giving them priority.
Yeah.
Give them a financial break as well. I don't know.
And just,
Are they working on the beach or working in the parking space?
It depends on the business. So for example, the Islander parks
Truck.
in a designated parking spot for their vehicle. But the massage tent is on the beach,
Beach, right.
so it depends on the business. Yeah.
and then the ice pops drives
Around, yeah.
So just pulls into it.
And they only pull into open spots and so forth.
They have a parking sticker, so they pay for the parking sticker.
Right. And then we set like a designated space for them to pull over last year. But if we only have one ice cream truck, that's.
How many businesses have a stationary vehicle like the, who's it, the
Islander?
Yeah.
So it was the Islander at Crescent Beach last year, and then Stars had a food truck at Wades Beach last year.
Right.
And then Mr. Softy drove around, so he was transient. And then for Crescent Beach, we had the massage tent, and you had the
Ice cream truck.
and the
K-Pops.
paddle boards.
Yeah, paddleboards on the beach,
On the
ice cream
beach.
truck in a spot on the other end of the beach.
Right.
paddleboard guy, he has his truck there or something where he keeps this stuff and he walks it down, so he takes a parking space up, correct?
Yes, and actually that was made last summer, like wrapping up the season when I was just taking a walk one day. Some of the businesses, not all, would like to have, in addition to their space on the beach, a designated parking spot,
Right.
because in the heat of the summer, it's like, okay, someone's renting a paddleboard, we're gonna go drop them off at Cockles Harbor,
Right.
and then they come back and the parking spot's been taken. So they wanted to be able to cone off and have their own spot. So that's a request that will probably come in with the application this year, is whether or not we'll grant a
Right.
How many
specific.
parking spaces are there, just out of curiosity? 50?
Oh,
I have no
Chief, do you know,
idea.
I was gonna say like 53.
Yeah, so
Right,
basically 10% of the spots are taken up by vendors. That's how, I'm just trying to visualize it in my head, okay? If you got 5 vendors,
Well, the food truck is like in a X-off area, it's not where people
Right.
can park.
He's not taking up a parking space. The massage guy didn't have a vehicle parked down there. He
No.
would set up and leave, park his own car somewhere else.
Paddleboard.
Paddleboard would
Generally
take
would
up a parking spot, but we did not designate him a spot. So if he left his spot, he lost his spot.
Ice cream truck.
Ice
took
cream
up
truck.
2 spots.
We put him in the hash marked area down towards the
Oh, so it
end, so
was-
he had a designated spot that didn't take up a parking spot. And then, so we tried, in the past, we haven't allowed them a designated parking spot. And then Wade's Beach, they're off in the back by where the
Right.
old volleyball, it doesn't take up any parking. So, I mean, historically, we haven't designated them a spot.
Mhm.
You know, it's first come, first serve, get there early, unload your gear. So that's something to consider.
I think if you're gonna change the pricing, what's gonna happen is if we don't change it reasonably soon, it will be here in
Yeah.
spring of next year,
Like,
going through the same conversation. Okay, and the more popular place is really Crescent Beach, is that where the most activity is?
Wade's Beach has gotten pretty busy in the past few years. I mean, more families, I think, are going to Wade's Beach,
but as
but
far as
Crescent Beach is
business,
still
yeah,
busier.
as far as business requests, there is predominantly Crescent Beach and not
Yeah.
Wade's.
So if you were asking for $100 increase, that wouldn't be outrageous. It's just a token amount. Would that be correct?
Sounds reasonable. Remember the last time we took it up? 'Cause we-
It's nothing,
We'll have to, yeah, we'll have to.
it's more symbolic than anything else.
Right.
Mhm.
You want to go for the gusto, Albert?
I don't know if that's going for the gusto or whatever, I don't know. I mean, it's using town property
I know,
in essence,
I know.
you know, and I,
A lot of town
I think we-
resources, yeah. We talk a lot about this stuff. I mean, we went down to look at the parking of the food trucks, and anyway, a lot of town time was spent to spend
Yeah.
on this. Yeah.
but it might reduce some of the traffic as well.
I don't know. I think it's gonna be busy down there no matter what.
Not the traffic per se, but the traffic on the port application.
How many applications we got?
I don't know, but that's
Yeah,
whatever.
Amber, if you could
Doesn't matter.
research the last time we raised the fees on this.
I feel like if we do raise the fees, they should,
There was no fee.
They should-
First fee.
yeah, they should.
This was the
Went
first
from
one?
There used to
zero.
be no fee like 5 years ago, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
used
I'd
to
be
just be
curious
you got
what
a
you-
permit, right?
Yeah, I'd
I
be-
thought that there
Right.
was, it used to just be you got permission. Now, then we made it, you have to pay for permission.
I'd still like to see when we institute that, just to do a CPI calculation on it to see
Yeah.
what should the fee be.
If we raise the fee, I think it should probably take effect next year because people
Oh,
have already
yes.
been financially planned.
Yeah, that's what.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's all.
Ken?
You're muted.
I'm unmuting. Hi. I just thought I'd give one point of clarification there regarding some of the businesses because we deal with it from the beach cleaning standpoint, right? There's really only 2 businesses that really occupy and stay occupying the beach throughout the summer. It's the massage tent area and the paddleboard and kayak rental. Some of these other businesses, just so you understand, are not, they might be doing a yoga class on the beach that happens at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever their designated days are for the hour that it happens, and then they leave the beach. So there isn't like a steady flow of, tents and such popping up all over the beach all day long and also taking up all those spaces. So from my standpoint, from the cleanup standpoint and the beach raking that we do on the weekends, most of the time those things are out of the way. In the case of the paddleboard rental, as long as they're not all laid out on the beach when we do the beach raking in the morning, it really doesn't have much of an impact on us.
And how is the boat service, launch service? How do they lay out?
The launch service lays out, at the town, towards the town landing, outside of the swim area. And they have, sometimes they set up a small tent that they sit underneath on on a bright, if the sun is really bad, there for a long stretch. And then they have a gangway that is off to the side that they roll out when the boats come into the beach, and they put on the bow of the boat. So they're really off the beaten path. They're not really in the way of anything. And generally, I don't even see, occasionally they may have a truck parked or somebody dropping something off, delivering something to them. But generally there's no parking for them at all that they impact, at least.
All right, so we covered all the questions that we.
Sounds good?
Yeah, I mean, we'll just
And some of
continue.
them will address as we
Yes,
review the
exactly.
actual.
Yeah, so there's nothing that we're going to.
Can I make a suggestion that after this year, after we establish
Mhm.
the positions and whom, can we finish it? Can we go over the pricing or whatever at that point in time, rather than
Yes, I was going to say,
come to the next spring, while we're right in the.
Why don't we do it when we have the applications and they're awarded, and this way going forward at that time,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right?
right now? We could do it right now,
Yeah.
I will schedule that on the agenda. All right. Next item on the list, on the agenda is chargeback for consulting fees. So we started working on this, but we are not complete. So Stephen had worked on fees for EIS, environmental impact statements, but we still have to work on site plan review fees, special permit fees, wetlands, ZBA, and planning board fees. So I think that one of the questions, so we need to just pick out in code section, and so Christina is back from vacation, so I'm gonna put some of this on her. She's shaking her head no, but she understands this best, having been a former planning board, ZBA, and working with the town board clerk, of how these fees come into play, and also, sees the invoices for both the environmental consultant as well as PW Grosser for site plan and seeker fees. Or did I say seeker on there? Anyway, so I'd like to have her work with Steve to continue to go over what code sections, if any, need modification, and what resolutions and things like that need to get drafted so that we can get these implemented.
I took a look at the code sections that authorize fees to be charged, and generally speaking, they will not require any change, because mostly they say that the fee is set pursuant to resolution. And so I think what we need is probably an omnibus fee resolution that the board can adopt, a fee schedule. And I'll work with Christina on that and get it to the board. If not, hopefully for next week, but if not, then shortly thereafter.
Yes. And I have to correct myself, Christina was not on vacation. She was out for bereavement, so sorry, Christina. Okay, so then I think just a couple of the questions that I had is I had sent to everybody just some, I went back through the last 6 months of PW Grosser fees, because when PW Grosser is looking at site plan review and seeker, it's a process. So they may do some work on, the initial, what's needed for seeker, and then, then they have to wait for, more information to come in from the applicant. Then they have to wait for the public hearing, and then they have to issue final reports. So I went back 6 months to pull fees on that. The environmentalist, I just went back 3 months because for the most part, she, it's a one and done for her, except for attendance at the town board public hearings to give us her reports. So the big ones are when we're looking at commercial entities. So Gardner's Bay Country Club, Liberty Lawn Care, Southbury Inc., Cheapwood, oh no, that was not commercial, Perlman Music Program, Shelter and Public Library. We had fees that ranged the gamut from like $4,800 to $16,000. And actually for Perlman Music Program, that was the biggest one. I may have not gone back far enough in time just because of the length of time that application was with ZBA and town board. So I'd like to try and figure out a way to establish some sort of deposit and then a refill mechanism. So I originally was thinking, do we do, $5,000 for a commercial application? And then for residential applications, it was mostly the environmental consultant on wetlands applications. And those ranged in fees from $262 to $562. Actually, no, $699 on a different page, yeah. So did we want to, do a deposit of $1,000 and then refund whatever did not get used? So I wanted to get board input so that we can give Steve some direction.
That sounds fine to me, 5,000 commercial.
Mhm.
That's all resident, it could probably be 500 or 750.
Yeah, I was thinking 500 might cover most of these.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a few that might go over, maybe when they get.
Yeah, so that for, I guess that's a little bit like the wetland, like it's not a big expenditure.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I guess we could 500 and then bill, they can't get their permit until they pay the rest of the whatever.
Right, whatever the balance is. Or,
But for,
If it's an application that will be pending for an extended period of time, you can provide that the deposit will be replenished if it dips below a certain amount.
yes, and that's what I wanted to do with the commercial, is like 5,000 if that was the number we picked, and then once it dipped below, $1,000 left in the, on account, then they have to replenish it back up to, 2,500. Wasn't sure.
I think 5,000 is a good starting point for commercial.
Mhm.
But even in spite of some of these numbers for site plan review,
Although they were over months, like, so Perlman was like.
These are
took months
huge
and months.
projects too.
So,
These non-residential instead of commercial.
okay, non-residential, yes, that's actually.
More accurate, just a lot, like, these are not.
Just go back. Reverse order. Yeah, so 1 month Perlman was 46.55. So yeah, then they'd have to replenish. The next month, another 4,000. I guess some sort of replenishment, but then I think things might have slowed down a little bit, so it was 1,600. We might not have to replenish. Without fees for them. No, here we go, another 3,000. So like they might have to on a monthly basis or every other month replenish.
What was that?
Carlton Music Program. I just picked on them because they are the largest.
I mean, do you think we could scale the deposit based on the scope of the project? If the project's estimated to be so many dollars, then is that getting complicated? You know, because I figure the secret for a $9 million project is going to be much higher than the secret for a, you know,
That's true.
a small.
You delineate
Site,
between,
yeah.
make a separate two categories or
Right.
something.
In the application, they have to tell us what the project cost is, so. Okay.
Or the amount can be fixed at a percentage of the project, estimated project cost.
Right.
Okay.
Something like that, just because the scale of some of these projects, it doesn't compute. So, you know,
Yeah.
you have the Liberty Lawn Care site plan, which is
Right,
small compared to, you know, Pearlman.
right.
That's a very, very, very different project.
Okay.
So establish thresholds for,
Yeah, I think for non-residential, we'll do percentage of project cost, and I'll play with these numbers that I pulled.
Yeah.
And then for residential wetlands applications, 500?
I mean, most of these came in under 500. I think that's
Mhm.
probably a fair starting spot.
Yeah. Steve, I do have a question. Every time we have to give a refund for something, we have to do a resolution.
Well, it's not really an expenditure of town funds. You're holding those funds for the applicant. But, so what other, who would authorize the expenditure otherwise? Or I shouldn't use the term expenditure, the disbursement. Who would authorize the disbursement otherwise?
Well, for ZBA and planning board, it could be the chair of those committees. For town board, it could be the supervisor.
Sure.
I don't know, it feels like for the record, you wanna do that, you wanna have a resolution.
Here's my thing is like, if we set it at 500, and like most of these would be getting refunds, I'm just sitting here counting like, oh, there's another resolution, there's another, like, I'd rather set it for 300 and then they have to pay us. We don't need a
Well,
And
resolution.
that makes sense, yeah. I'm down with that.
I'm just,
The amount of money, I would just hold the permit until it's paid out.
okay, so don't even do a deposit for
Yeah.
wetlands.
For wetlands, yeah, it's just, you're gonna
Yeah.
have that balance at the end.
So no deposit for wetlands or for residential?
Residential wetlands.
And not every vote of the town board needs to be memorialized in a written resolution. It can be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. One board member can make a motion, the other second it, the board votes, and the action is approved and should just be reflected in the meeting minutes. If you're looking to avoid the formality of preparing a written resolution in advance.
I kind of would rather just stick with the resolutions because it's like, we've got that standardized.
Yes, but that's fine. Whatever you wish to do is fine. But what I was suggesting is just with respect to dispersing funds that remain on deposit after an application is completed, whether you might wish to do that with less formality.
Okay.
Okay. And then I guess with respect to ZBA and planning board for deposits, Christina, can I task you with kind of coming up with a potential deposit amount for those? And maybe
Yeah,
once,
I think it should follow the same lead, commercial
okay, so,
deposit and residential non-deposit, which is how the resolution. It's like the benefit of, you know, the fee of 450, right? If, as we were discussing, wetlands permit applications and waterfront properties, 450 is the price of fixed light fixture for them, right?
Yeah.
So they will, presumably they will move on the project and they will pay their, you know, outstanding balance very quickly. And then we issue the resolution subsequently. I think that makes sense.
And then for ZBA and, yeah, okay.
So does the application have to read differently so that the people know? I guess I'm looking at, I was just looking here at Secret Avenue, for example. Okay, that's is that residential?
Yes.
Mhm.
You're talking.
So, when I look at the grocers and I look at Hampton, that's a lot of money.
It's one out.
Yeah, that's an odd application. That's,
And ultimately, you have before it proceeds,
Correct, before we issue the resolution.
Right.
I mean, the resolution can be voted on, but it's
Right.
not released to the applicant until they pay.
we wouldn't let them get their
I
permit.
mean, even if you don't charge anybody, there should be something in the application that they're responsible for.
Yes.
Right, and you would make that modification, that would be change of
So when we
policy.
do the resolution setting all of these fees, and then we amend all of the applications so that it's reflected, so that the applicants are aware.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, so I think I
That makes
know how
sense.
we're going to proceed with this then.
Okay.
So not for next week, but hopefully the following work session. Any other questions?
No.
Anyone from the public on this topic? Right, the next item was the committee memberships. So I sent out today a blueprint for standardizing committee appointments. And so it ended up being a lot more work, and I found a lot more problems than I actually, like, I thought we needed to fix some things, but then it was like,
The
oh,
blueprint, you're talking about this?
yes, yeah.
You know, it's funny, I worked on this, and I didn't complete it because I didn't have enough time yesterday, because it got very complicated to look at, because it felt to me that the membership should be on this spreadsheet as well as their expiration date, because I lost track, because, you know, I don't know who was on the, I had to go back and forth to take a look at who was there. So what I was trying to do is create a spreadsheet with the membership, with their dates, and this way you can sort at any given time who's outstanding, because when I started to look at some of the dates that were old, okay? I just think maybe if you modify it, I started it, but I didn't complete it.
Mhm. Yeah, I had a second screen open with the website up. And also Amber's PDF, her PowerPoint presentation also had
Had
been
all that
listed.
done, yeah.
Yeah. But you have that spreadsheet now because I forwarded it to everybody,
Mhm.
right?
Oh,
So
thank you.
you can, we should move that to SharePoint. I'll get that moved to SharePoint so that if you want to make some edits and additions to that, you can.
Sorry.
I'll upload that to SharePoint.
Right.
So that way, if you want to make that kind of an addition to it, you can.
Okay.
So what I was hoping to do is just to like quickly go through some of these, and we like maybe not, you know, make a decision on all of them, but if we could start to go through it. So I'll just start at the top. Board of Assessment Review, all but one member expires on a September 30th date. And the reason you'll see this in numerous committees, is we've discussed briefly when Amber was pulling all of this together for us, is that it's nice for each committee to be, okay, September 30th is our date when we have to, every year, the clerk is like, okay, do we have anybody expiring this year? Rather than, oh, we've got to remember somebody's doing a February date and someone's got a September date and someone's got a December 31st date, to just standardize expirations, not to put them all in 1 year, but on the rotation level, just have it so that it's easier to keep track of. So for that one,
Is that a 6-year term?
that is a 6-year term. Yeah, actually, I should probably pull up. Actually, maybe Christina, if you could pull up Amber's PowerPoint presentation. So she had given us all the parameters for each committee, so that way, so we're on Board of Assessment Review. You'll have to figure out which, like, I put these in alphabetic order, she in a different order.
Just email to us, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
PowerPoint?
Yes, it
Yeah.
was.
Wow.
Okay. Let me just download it into my.
There we go, yeah. Yeah, so it's, yeah, the current members serve a term of 6 years. So as you can see, everybody except for Noel Cunningham expires on a September 30th date. And so, actually, as I'm looking at this, so when Noel Cunningham expires on March 14th, 2028, we should reappoint or fill with the September 30th, 2030 date. And then I guess this, I thought I also, we have 2 people, Reeves Thompson and Peter McCracken, expiring on September 30th, 2028. And I wanted to get them separated into different years. So I meant to put in that one of the 2 of them should get reappointed for 1 year, and then everybody can move forward
Right.
with a
exactly.
6-year term. I knew I was gonna miss things.
It's a lot to juggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this doesn't require any action on our part at the moment. It's
Mhm.
just if everyone thinks that this is a good idea so that we get everybody normalized on the same date and then staggered, that this spreadsheet will be something that the town clerk and the committee clerk monitor when we're doing future appointments.
Right. Actually, she has all the information. It's just a question, I forgot about this. Okay, she has, if we combine it all together, you can even put a column there for the terms, and this way everything is clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we're good with that, we can say she'll go ahead with that in the future.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
think that
gonna
makes
add,
sense.
I'll add in Reeves or Peter. Be for 20. Okay. Board of Ethics, right now, there's nothing to be done there other than, you may have seen that one member, Shelby, if you could go to Board of Ethics, Christine.
It's right below Board of Assessment. It's the next page.
So Shelby, because she is running for office, needed to resign because you cannot be on the committee if you are running for office. So we just need to advertise, well, it's not even actually I wrote down advertise, but it's that one member, no more than one member has to be a town employee. And so we need to think about, we need to advertise internally an employee who would be interested in getting on the Board of Ethics. So, something.
So she has to step away now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Is
she's,
that you, Stephen, that mandated that?
Actually, no. I prefer to structure a board with no employees on it. And the reason for that is one of the functions of the board is to give ethics advice. And people may be reluctant to share their questions with a board that includes a coworker.
But it's in our town code that.
it's
requires-
currently in
Yes.
our town code, so if the Board of Ethics should, well, we can, when we go to the next one, we can ask them if they want to reconsider that, based upon council's advice and make that recommendation.
Employee.
Make that recommendation, and then we can bring it back to the board.
It's a good idea. Yeah, I like that.
We just have to approach someone, there's plenty of town employees.
Yes, yes. Okay. All right, so for the moment, we'll look internally, but we will also ask the Board of Ethics if they wish to change.
Yeah, this is a different order than in.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, so CAC, they have, 4 members have expired and we need to reappoint.
CAC is page 7, Christina.
So we had 3 members who expired on 9/20. Well, actually, they had different dates, but
Mhm.
they're listed there. So my suggestion is so that we kind of don't have 4 people expiring like within a few months of each other, because I just think for institutional knowledge, you don't want to turn over an entire committee all at once.
Yeah.
Sorry. Flinging
No, I need
paper
a
clips.
paperclip.
And then also just getting all of their dates aligned. So, we should just select 3 of the 4 that need to be reappointed on September 20th, 24, and reappoint them to September 20th, 26. Reappoint, and we've already discussed it, so we don't need to advertise. They are interested in staying on. Reappoint the member who expired on January 31st, 2025 to a 9/20/25 date. And then to finally get the last person, Christine, who was recently appointed, too bad we didn't have this pulled together then. We reappointed him to October 28th, so next time we reappoint him, we'll roll him to a September 28 date.
That sounds good.
So the composition of this council is not going to change.
No,
Got it.
no. So that was just the only thing, is just to get everybody aligned and get them spread out a little bit so that we don't have so many expiring at once. Community Housing Board, we are currently with 6 members, so we need to advertise for another member. And when we appoint that person, we want to appoint them to a January 31st, 2030 date. Christine, if you're searching for Community Housing Board.
We advertised for that, didn't we? I thought I saw that.
Yes. And then we have some members who expire on January 31st.
It's the last page, page 20. Sorry.
So some members expire on January 31st, 3 expire on Feb 9th, and 1 on December 31st. So I think because most of them were, well, actually, it's easier to move them back to January 31st, because with the terms, it's easier to just shave a few days off rather than having to stagger them differently. So that's why, even though most of them, or a couple of them had,
So
yeah,
there's
it's like,
only
yeah,
one outstanding that is expired.
yes.
And they all want to serve, continue to serve?
There's,
Well,
no,
who's
the
going
one,
off?
Maria Magenti,
Oh,
she's not
the
continuing.
expired person.
Yes.
Right.
So she's the only one that we need to replace.
You've already advertised.
Yeah, we have advertised.
have.
Yeah.
Those in the
Yeah.
paper.
So those were the only changes, is just to kind of normalize or standardize the expiration dates. So that one's easy.
I haven't thought about that. Do we have any thoughts? On what? On a person to approach for this? Not to mention any names, but.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't mention any names.
Yes, there are people applying.
Okay, good.
Okay, good.
On CPF, they only have 6 members, so we need to advertise for another member, which we've been doing. We have a couple of applications. So when we appoint whoever we select, it would be a February 2nd, 2029. The terms of the members is not defined in this committee. So my suggestion is we establish by resolution the terms.
It was 4 years for community preservation.
I think that's one thing that.
It might be made up.
Well, no, we have to look to see if it came out of the enabling legislation from the state.
Oh.
So we should check that first, actually. Because that's where, when we were looking at it, that we discovered that we were supposed to have a farmer on.
Yes.
So, yeah, so we won't proceed on that one at the moment. We'll investigate what the enabling legislation is. I had said 3 years just because other 7 member committees, we have 3-year rotation on memberships. But I'm open to 4 years if there's nothing on enabling legislation. And then when the 4 members on this committee will all expired on February 2nd, 2025. So to better stagger them, my suggestion is we just randomly select 2 to expire on 2/27 2/2/2027 and 2/2/2028, so that we don't have the committee all, like half the committee potentially
Yeah.
being replaced all at once. So if everyone's good with that.
Yep. It's fine with me.
Okay.
Joey Denny is 27.
Sorry, what
It's
was that?
2027.
Oh,
Joey Denny is 2027.
oh, okay. Okay, so we'll take a look at that. Okay, that's good to know. Deer and Tick was another easy one. All but one member expires on a June 24th date. So when Cody Miller expires on 12/31/25, we reappoint or fill her seat with a 6/24/2028 date.
Yeah, everybody's coming back, I believe.
Yeah, there's no one that's expiring just yet.
Page 3.
For EMS, the number of members is not defined. So we should do a resolution that establishes the committee at 5 members, which is what it's historically been. And then all
EMS is
members.
page 11.
And then all of the members are expiring on December 31st, 2025. So again, we should stagger them. So I was going to suggest reappoint or fill 2 members for 2026, and then 3 of them for December 31st, 2027.
That makes sense.
Ferry Study Group, the number of members is not defined. So we currently only have 3 members. We are advertising for additional members, but we should have an establishing resolution, either 3 members or 5 members. So I don't know, it's been a while since we've had.
Didn't we just put?
Art Williams, yeah.
Right. So we have 3 members now.
So we have 3 members.
Sounds like number 3.
So just leave it at 3? Yeah, I mean, the only thing is, I mean, since we only have 3, then we need all 3 in order to have a quorum, so 3 would actually be better. Okay, and then the terms of the members for Ferry Study Group are not defined. So I was going to suggest, especially if we have 3 members, the terms to be 3 years each. So when they come up, we will stagger them. Or maybe even do a resolution to give them terms once we define that there should be terms.
Yep. Yeah.
I think, yeah,
Define terms and then give them new
Yes.
appointment dates.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah,
That
because I
makes
think when
sense.
Art was appointed, I don't think we gave him, I think we appointed him, but without a term.
That is very possible.
Yeah. Okay, Green Options, they only have 6 members, so I think
We
we're
need one.
advertising for an additional. And when we
Page
get
13.
when we get that person, appoint them to expire on May 10th, 2027. And again, this is another committee where some members expire on May 10th, some on May 11th, one on September 19th, 2 on 10/31. It should be per resolution, May 10th. So I just put in there, like, when these people expire, reappoint them to whatever dates would make sense.
Right.
So if everyone's good with that, that'll just be on
Sounds good.
Amber and the committee person's watch list.
Okay.
The health and wellness, we established that committee, but we did not define the number of members.
That is correct.
We have 7 members, so we should just do a resolution or amend the resolution we did to establish 7 members.
It was, and then as it's shaking out, I think we'll know exactly who's going to stay.
If there are 9 people on this list. Oh, ex officio. Never mind.
Right.
And then the members are to serve staggered 5-year terms, but it was not set up that way. So when the different members expire, we'll go ahead and fix that. Licensing Review Board members to serve no more than 2 years, but when we set them up, some go for 4+. But I think the licensing review board is going to look at the entire code section. So I think for the moment, we'll just leave this be until the committee's had a chance, that the board's had a chance, the license review board has had a chance to figure out what changes they want to make. It's kind of like when the Board of Ethics was reconfigured a couple of years ago. They took a look at the existing code and then came back and said, okay, these are the changes, so we'll just make sure we incorporate their terms and things like that. And love the planning board, no changes were needed. We've taken care of that one. So we've expanded from
We're getting down that
5
rocky
to
road.
7, and all of their expiration dates are on point, so we're good there. The Recreation Committee, this committee can be disbanded. The committee members were asked, some of them have expired terms. There's really no reason for this committee to exist. Bethany, she runs it, can talk to the town board liaisons if there's any issues, if she needs to get some input from the community. The people who historically were on the rec committee, said they'd be willing to, just give her advice if she needs it. But this was created years ago, I think, when the rec director was a part-time position, and there was a lot more that needed to be done.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even the committee agreed they weren't necessary.
Yes, because I reached out, I reached out to Kim Riley, who chairs that committee, and she reached out to everybody. Taylor's Island, the number of members is not established. So we should establish that, and since they currently have 6 members, and I think historically there were 7 members, we do that resolution too.
Okay. Do we have
You have to affix, excuse me, Ben.
No.
You have to affix
We
a
should,
total number of
well,
members.
otherwise you don't know what your quorum is supposed to be. So if they have a meeting, like, right now, like, 3 people show up out of 6 members, do they have a quorum because half the group is there, or should there really be 4 of them?
So
So,
that makes sense.
yeah.
I was looking for flexibility.
Yeah, I know, but, yeah, because these are public-facing committees, yeah. So then they would only have 6 members, so we should advertise for another member, and appoint for them to expire on 12/13/28. And then we had the same situation, some members expire on 12/31, some on 1/17, and another one on 2/2. So I just went through and said, okay, well, like, when these ones roll, like, reappoint or fill with these dates to get everybody standardized. So.
Yep.
WAC, the resolution, you need to show that one. So right now, the resolution says there should be 5 members, but we have 7. So we should formalize a resolution that establishes the committee at 7 members. We also have the town engineers to serve on one of the 5 seats, but we are going to make the town engineer an advisor to the committee and not a member. So we should change that in the resolution. The terms are designated at 2 years, but other 7 committee member, 7-person committees, the terms are 3 years. So we should fix that. And then all members are to expire on April 2nd, 2025. So as we fill or reappoint, we should stagger them in. And so I just said, let's do 2 for 2026, 2 for 2027, and 3 for 2028.
Okay.
So if everyone's good with that, we'll work on that.
That's fine.
WQIAB, this one gets a little tricky because some of the members come from specified committees like CPF, WAC, and WMAC. So we don't have, their term should run coterminously with their base committees. So I think we need to amend the existing resolutions where these were set up, because we've got each member to be appointed to a 5-year term, such terms to be staggered, members to serve a 5-year term after initial phase-in period. So these two resolutions we need to amend so that we state that, like, if Greg Toner was to resign or not be reappointed from WAC, then his term on WQIAB
Would also terminate.
has to terminate. And so, and then the same with James Eklund, like we get further down. James Eklund, I think, needs to be reappointed to WMAC, and once that gets determined, then his WQIAB reappointment, if that's what's chosen, needs to align with that.
Right.
And the same with Tui. And then we have 2 community members expiring on different month and day, so I think Betty Bishop is the next one to expire, so when she gets reappointed or her seat gets filled, we reappoint to 2/33. WMAC, members by resolution to have 1-year terms, yet we have not followed that. We've been appointing people for 3-year terms, so I think we should establish that by resolution.
Yeah, I like the consistency of having all 7-member boards have 3-year terms.
Yeah,
Sorry, where are we, WAC?
WMAC, yeah. This says the committees consist of 9 members. We have 7.
Okay.
So I think we should do a resolution to set it at 7. All but 1 member expires on February 1st date, so there was almost consistency on that one. So when Skylar's term expires, we reappoint him to a February 1st date. The chairman is to be appointed annually. This is the only committee where we specify how often the chairman gets appointed.
It's good you bring that up, because I was thinking about, I know what you're doing here, but it's like, maybe we should look at that chairman seat differently. Okay, and I'm only reflecting on myself. Okay, first of all, I think being in community preservation, again, we're going back a long time, and we're really looking to update it. I think sometimes our terms are too long. Like when I think about myself, I think I remained as a chairman too long. Okay, I think that it's always good to have different people come forward, and you get different points of views. They handle it differently, and I think it opens it up to the board more. In preservation, how I got into the chair seat was that nobody wanted it. Okay, and I think that's what a lot of these chairman seats are about. But I think it would be good to have something where you were able to revisit it, at least revisit, that's all.
We could put a term limit.
Yeah,
You could be a chair of not to exceed 5 years or something.
yeah, something like that. That's what I like. I like that idea.
Okay. So,
But
other
so,
than zoning, sorry.
yeah, I was gonna say, so we're on WMAC, but do we want to go back and institute this on all committees?
I think we do. But the question is, zoning and planning are done differently, because we just did planning. They internally pick their own chairman.
They kind of have a state mandate.
Yeah.
They go by.
They've got an enabling legislation.
So does zoning.
State,
doesn't it?
yes, both of them,
Yeah,
yes.
so those 2 are out. But all the other committees,
We do have
We pick the chairman?
for committees.
Mhm.
That's where it's based.
sorry, I didn't hear that,
We
Christine?
do have policies and procedures for committees and boards. That's where this rule that they pick their own chair is based.
So they pick their own chairs, but
Yes.
we have to approve it.
Yes.
Yes. So we should take a look at the committees and boards' policies and procedures and see what we want to fix there.
Well, there's also a recommendation from the boards. It's really a recommendation. They don't pick,
Correct.
they're making the recommendation.
Yeah, and then we have to approve. it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can
I think
I just suggest that if you're going to term limit the chairmanship, of course, you'll want to make clear whether at the end of that term, the individual in that seat loses their seat altogether, or only the chairmanship?
Right.
Yeah. Here's my concern. If we term limit chair people.
We
and
may
then-
have no one to
and
run the
then
meetings.
No one wants to step up, like.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is, it's just like a reminder that your term limit is up, and the chairman should really say, that my term is up. And is there someone else, maybe I want to break, would someone else step up? And if there's someone doesn't step up, it's a completely different thing.
So my suggestion, at least on WMAC, is, well, a resolution to appoint chairperson coterminously with their term.
Right.
Or do we just take it out and all chair positions run per our policies and procedures? And so there is where we define.
I think that makes more sense to have one policy and procedure
Policy.
for all
Mhm.
committees,
Yes.
and they all follow the same
Yeah.
guidelines.
Yeah.
That way, we're not dealing with this
Yeah.
alphabet soup
Creating for.
chaos, yeah.
And I'd still, in the policies and procedures, like to state that we appoint the chairperson coterminously with their term, so that when that person's term is up, it's like, okay, now it's time to revisit. Are they going to remain chair if we reappoint them?
Right.
And that way, it's not every single year, which is a little bit cumbersome.
Right.
It will be every 3 years for
Right.
most of these.
And it gives them the opportunity too to say, I'd love to be reappointed, but not as chair, and
Mhm.
then put it
Yeah.
back to the committee, saying,
Right. Okay, so we'll pull that out of this resolution to get rid of that in WMAC, but then we need to revisit policies and procedures.
Can I make two quick comments? First, when I draft a code of ethics, I generally provide that the Board of Ethics will select its own chair, because that gives the Board of Ethics a degree of independence. Secondly, I didn't mention this earlier when you were talking about some of the existing committees that have no terms. Just, I'm not suggesting that this will factor into your thinking, but just to state it, if a member is serving on a committee that has no fixed terms, they serve at the pleasure of the appointing authority. If they serve for a fixed term, they can only be removed for cause.
Mhm.
okay.
Could you say that one more time?
Right. If you have a committee with no stated terms, the members serve at the pleasure of the appointing authority, which generally will be the town board. If there are fixed terms stated, then those members can only be removed for cause.
Okay, so back to WMAC. We have 3 members who expired on February 1st, 2025, so we either need to reappoint or fill. So I made the notation that the liaisons confer with the chair about reappointing or filling those seats.
Okay.
So,
Forgot to do that, sorry.
no, that's okay, that's okay. West Neck Water, terms are to be staggered 5 years, but 2 expire on 4/25/25 and 3 on 4/25/27. So as we get to those dates, reappoint or fill, and I gave some specifications for the dates that we should be picking. And then the last one, ZBA, no changes needed. But
Okay.
this will sort of standardize everything,
Yeah.
and so Amber and I will work on the resolutions that are easy and can be done. If there's something more complicated, we will bring in Steve, and then Amber will have the blueprint for future reappointments. And those, I think, where we're not reappointing someone to 3 years because we want to get their date conformed, I think we can just put something in the resolution at the time of that appointment, recognizing that we're not complying with our own resolution, but because we're trying to standardize dates, this is why this person is getting reappointed for a shorter than 3-year period. Does that sound Good, Steve?
Yes.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay. Any questions from the table?
No.
Any questions from the public? Okay. Our next agenda item is Rozos. WQI had a meeting on Thursday. There was an application from.
Before you dive in,
Oh,
I'm
yeah, you
going
have
to recuse myself from
Yes,
this
I keep
application.
forgetting. Glad you keep
Because
remembering.
the homeowners reached out to me for some
Okay.
guidance. I'm
Yeah.
going to recuse.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I
No
forgot that part. Okay. So Jess did forward this from WQI on Friday. So it's Laura Rozos, 1 Gardeners Bay Drive. It's an early 1970s home, 2-bedroom, owner occupied. Primary residence, 2 individuals, 120 days a year, 4 guests, maybe 20 days a year.
Uzi Sen 7.
Yes, so they want, they have a conventional septic system. They are doing the question of renovations, additions, or home improvements. They said yes, but they're replacing decks, front doors, and kitchen countertops. So they're not increasing bedroom count, which for our policies and procedures would, if they were increasing bedroom count, might prohibit them from getting a grant. But since it's not that, it is a voluntary upgrade. And yeah, they want to have a Sen 7. And go to a grant request that the WQI put forward was, I think it was 16,000, but let me just double check this.
12,000 base grant and 4,000, well, relocation.
Yeah, so the total is 16,000. So if we're all okay with this, we can put this on for resolution on Monday night.
Okay.
Fine with that.
Fine.
Okay, all right, good.
Can I just make
Oh,
one
yeah.
comment before we move on? I
Uh-huh.
just want to say, for the benefit of anyone who's listening, that Meg's recusal was absolutely a perfect recusal. When you recuse yourself, you make a disclosure. You give the reason for the recusal. It doesn't have to be your life story, but just the basic reason. And then Meg got up off the dais, making a visual demonstration of the fact that she was not participating or influencing the outcome. So that was well done. And I'm mentioning all this just for those who might use it as an example.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
She's had a lot of practice.
And the Board of Ethics has directed us well.
They've given very good guidance.
So the next on the list is board member reports. I, for the life of me, cannot find my WQI folder with my notes from that meeting. I guarantee I'll find it when I walk back into my office. So I don't know if, Albert, you wanted to.
I zoomed in, but I didn't really know.
I don't really have any, I mean, it was largely Fresh Pond,
Yeah, I was going to say Fresh Pond
this
was.
application.
Yes, yes.
Application.
And actually, yeah, and then the Rozos WQI grant, and then one other thing. Let me just look for one thing that Jessica sent me. So many committees, and so there's so many things that come from her. We went back to, was it Karasik? Is that the one?
Oh,
who came
okay.
back
Oh,
and
yeah.
asked for, yes, Carol Karasik, who came back and asked for, she just found information I was looking at in October. That's where the folder is. in my town board work session minutes, or meeting folder. She found something from November where we did go back and look at how many potential applicants could come back to us. So what happened is we at one point went from $15,000 grants for WQI to 6,000 because it was pre-pandemic and we were running lower on funds, and the concern was that we would not be able to have, give as many grants out. Also, at the time, the costs were lower, and so when we did an average, it was like, yeah, 26,000 is kind of what the average installation price is, barring any like really odd outstanding things. Every so often, someone has to do like, dig up a complete driveway, just things that can really add to costs, replant a lot of different, expensive bushes, et cetera. We at one point went back then from $6,000 to $12,000 grants because of those increased costs, and we also gave more money for well relocation and pressurized shallow drain field. Any applications that were granted during the $6,000 base grant era, we did take those up to $12,000 base grants. So then the request was, hey, I was given and paid out a $6,000 grant, but now you've just given people who didn't complete their work $12,000. So she was part of that ask because her costs were so much higher. So we did go back actually last November and pulled numbers to say, this is how many grants, people could potentially come back. This is potentially how much money they could ask for based upon the differential between 6 and 12,000. And there was a discussion at a work session that we didn't want to go down that road and reopen closed, payouts, closed rebates. So neither one of us could remember at the meeting the answer to that question, but Jess ended up finding the information for us.
Then she said that this was done in 23, that the town board passed a resolution to bring people current.
That was for people who had outstanding rebate applications but had not yet completed and been paid out. So those were the ones that we did up from 6 to 12.
At that time.
But she was somebody who I think was paid out in 2021 or 2022. Quickly.
I think.
We didn't
Yeah,
do anything.
Right, we decided not to.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were paid out, the grant was approved in 2021 and paid out in 2021. So yeah, we did have that discussion. It's just at the meeting when this was brought up and the applicant or, former applicant was there. Neither one of us could remember the particulars, so.
Yeah.
But then once Jess found it and I went back, it's like, oh yeah, we did discuss it.
We did bring them.
We decided not to go back and redo the rebates for anybody who's paid out in that period of time when we were only giving
I
$6,000.
hope so.
But we did at least look at it, so
They paid almost $59,000 for their system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Voluntary system. I mean,
but anyway, so I will circle back to that applicant, but since that came up, I just figured rehash it here, just like the history since.
I think that's worthy of a look, the application.
We did look at it last November and decided not to move forward with looking at it. So that you're asking that we do look at that one in particular.
I don't know. I mean, they paid
$59,000.
$59,000.
$59,000 for a residential IA system.
They had to have multiple surveys, multiple engineer reports.
There's a lot of DEC involvement in that
Phil.
project.
It was in the wetland, they were under wetlands. I don't know.
I mean, and the recommendation from WQI last year was to bring them up the extra 6,000 to get them from 6 to 12, and then the well relocation at the time was a $2,000 rebate to take them up to the 4,000, so to give them an $8,000 additional amount. But when we looked at all of the ones paid out, that's the folder that I can't find at the moment because I did have numbers written down on my notes. is too
How many
long.
were there? How many were applications that were, that could have been brought up?
Let me look one last place, now that I'm thinking
I'm
about
trying to
it.
put you on the spot.
No, I
because-
mean, I had written down but I was looking for my WQI notes in a WQI folder, but I have a feeling that after that meeting, because it ran a little later than I thought, and hadn't eaten dinner, I just stuck everything together. And so I think I now know where that folder is. I looked for it twice today. So if you all want to continue with around the table reports, I'll look to see if I can find my notes.
When was the, that we decided not to go forward? Do you have that?
November 2024,
November 20, okay.
but I'll see if I can find it. I had it all last Thursday. So whoever wants to go next on around the table.
I can go. I didn't actually have any meetings last week. Surprising. But I did have just two things I wanted to comment on. The Legion keeps having fun events, and this weekend they had a soup competition, so that was fun. Good fundraiser for the Legion.
Keep missing these things. It sounds
Sure,
great.
it was fun. And then the other one is, now that the weather is changing and the seasons are getting warmer and more people want to be outside,
Don't jinx it.
please be careful when you're walking, biking, driving. Be sure to share the road. And if you are riding a bicycle or an e-bike or essentially anything on wheels, please wear a helmet. I'm begging you to please wear a helmet. We don't have great shoulders here. We're not really that bicycle friendly as far as our roads go. So please take precautions and wear a helmet and follow the rules of the road. And that goes for driving, walking, riding your bike, skateboarding, essentially anything. Now that it's beautiful out, people are going to want to be outside. And we want people outside, just safely. That's my public service announcement for the evening. Anybody else?
Albert?
No, I don't have anything, just as WQI.
Okay, I have a few words. Should I wait for Amber or?
It's up to you.
Well, let me start it this way. I went to the school board meeting yesterday, okay? Last night, okay, to see what was going on, and I have to confess that they run a great meeting, okay? It's clear, it's crisp, and it's really on timely, and they get done, and I'm jealous that they can able to get that done in such a quick thing. But the outcome was, the school is doing very well. They have some good things going on over there. It does look like they were able to reduce their budget so far. It looks like they're talking about a 5.93, okay, which leads me into the conversation that I wanted to talk about with the assessments that the public has been receiving. I'm sure I've received a number of calls, and I'm sure everybody else has received calls over the tax, the new evaluations. I think we got a lot of people hurting, okay, and I think it's something to be discussed between taxes, homeowners insurance, schools, and so forth. So, I would like to go back to the beginning of January when we were going around the table in terms of things that, putting priorities together. And I, at that time, one of the priorities that I had put on the table, which were not specific to wetlands or was really more of a structural thing. I talked about the budget, okay, because I think the budget is what's going to really be driving a lot of the expenses going forward, okay? And I at that time, I just got my note that I had in front of me here about monitoring the budget on a bi-monthly basis, and I just made some comments of what I think we as a board should be really conscious about, okay? I think we really need to get into our budget a whole lot earlier this year, okay? I think that we should really be looking at even our budget for 2025 and really evaluating things that we've already budgeted for. Are there places where we can cut back or trim or look at things, at least give it a whirl to take a look at, okay? And I think in terms of the 2026 budget, okay, which, it consecutively has always been addressed in the later months of October, and it's always been delayed. I'd like to see if we could just make sure that we have our accountants have their stuff together for the town by the normal filing, which is usually on May 20th, okay? But I don't think there's anything, I think we should take this serious, because I think there's going to be a lot of people are going to be hurting during this period of time. I think we got to make sure our budgets are not, our percentage of increase, we got to try to trim that and make that more acceptable, and there's going to be some pain, okay? And, but I think this is the right time to take a look at it and go by department and taking a look at things, okay? I don't think we can sit back and let people, I expected to see more people here today. I thought that we would have people from the public here as a result of this, okay? And, but I just think this is the time for us to take a look at it. And I suggest that we do that, okay? And I don't know how we're going to go about it, okay? But I think that we got to look at really what our budget was for this year. I think we should take a look at it, and we should examine where we are. Are we on target with our current budget? Are we over here? And I just think we need to spend a lot of time right now on our budget, okay? And I think we shouldn't wait until until the end of the year. I think we should do it on a regular basis. I don't know what everybody's thoughts are here, but all I'm hearing is there's a lot of people hurting at this particular time. And it's not just because of the audit, it's Suffolk County is increasing, our sales tax went up, our homeowners went up. We're feeling it all around. We don't have the school in place yet. We've got a library that's taking place. So I think what it really comes down to, and what I think Judith Lemansky did a great job when she presented it. The tax rate is really, we as the board, when we develop the budget, that's a good part of how that whole thing gets developed. And I think we should start taking a look at that. I think we should start taking a look at it now. I don't know what everybody's thoughts are, but I'd be glad to listen.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, in light of the fact that where people are now, when they got their assessments.
No, it's.
To start to look at what we can do to make adjustments now, before next year comes, before the fall.
Ben, were you dealing with the accounting firm or something? I forgot what happened. Our current accountant, okay, he was late last year, I think, giving us our thing. So can we get him can we make a phone call to him to say, hey, we really want this thing to be, in May, we want to know where we are?
I wasn't dealing with them, but I was the one complaining about it.
I think what?
I wasn't dealing with them, but I was the one complaining
Right.
about them. Because they were late last year, which also then slowed down the audit. So we need to get that piece on track and on time. And I do agree, a lot has changed in our world. And, right now, all the talk out there is about we could be looking at a recession. And I think it's best if we get ahead of budgeting items now. So.
Comments that I have is, the 2026 budget is going to be even harder than last year's budget was, just because the shift of the tax burden from the waterfront properties and water view properties to the center of the island is making, is going to be felt, a lot by the people in the center. So we need to hold the line wherever and everywhere. with respect to the audit timeline, Shelby and I have a meeting with the contract accountants and the auditors tomorrow morning to lay out the schedule for this year. My question is that I truly want to understand the complaints, we're going to get the audit report done earlier, but how much, when you got that, did that help you in the process? The auditors came in, I tore apart those numbers and went through and rewrote different sections of the management discussion and analysis. How much do you actually, how much does that inform what you're doing budget-wise? Because Shelby had all of the numbers, she had numbers through August 31st. She had the December prior year numbers in there. So I'm just curious, what you're getting out of that, because if I'm going to relay that message to the auditors and the contract accounts tomorrow, what is it that you're looking for in particular? Because if there's pieces of information that would be helpful to you for you to have sooner, then let me know that so that we can convey that message. But I didn't hear anybody, once you had the audit reports, come back and say, we'd like another meeting with the auditors to better understand things. You didn't have questions, so I'm just curious.
Well, I think what would be helpful, okay, even here, I mean, Shelby gives us she gives a report for the general fund, okay, but I think that we really need to have a balance sheet, bi-monthly, where it shows all the components. And I think when we do the budget, I think that it's great to know what you spent in the last year, but that was not from an audit, it was really from our program. But I think what's really more important is to go from a zero base, meaning I don't think we should look at a department and say, hey, you had $10,000 last year, what do you need this year? Okay, I think it's more of forget what you spent. Tell me what you need, okay, and what do we really need, okay? And I think that's how we have to look at it, like a zero accounting basis, not about, because when you do these budgets, okay, people, if you tell somebody you had 10,000 last year, everybody's always looking for more and how do you expand? I think it's really, you have to get more into the nuts and bolts, okay, of really what do we need? What can we do to bring this thing down?
We get that report. That month.
I've never gotten that report.
It's in your email. We received it for the last month, I believe.
Yeah, shall we have
seeing it.
Yeah.
It's not new. She's been sending that.
We don't get a report. We don't get a report from the highway department.
It was all in there.
Well, it's
Whatever, maybe, okay, maybe.
It's a comprehensive report,
Well, one of the things that came up last year that made it a little confusing, and maybe it's been corrected now since it was an issue last year, is we have certain employees paid from two different departments.
Correct.
And it was hard to track how much they're
But
getting paid.
And then we had a spreadsheet that pulled that all together.
Eventually, yeah.
Yes. Internally, those spreadsheets have been created for years. It's just no one on the board ever asked for them besides me. So I created the spreadsheet.
So we asked for it last year, we
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess the question is, it should be regular, standard operating procedure. The other one was.
Yeah, and so it will be. There's a number of reports. That one will be included in the suite of, spreadsheets that are available. There's also spreadsheets that I've uploaded calculating payroll tax returns. It was never done before. So I did that because I wanted precise numbers. I didn't want to guesstimate. So there's more that's going to be in the working spreadsheets this year that got added on because it wasn't adequate for my purposes as supervisor. Like when I was on the town board, I was looking at things a lot, but once I became the primary person responsible for this, then we upped the game more.
And my other big complaint from last year, which Shelby solved beautifully, was we were looking at the new budget, we weren't looking at the old budget on the same page. And we didn't have the audited financials, but we had estimated audited financials. And that's what Shelby incorporated into the spreadsheet. And I just want to make sure that that's going to be standard operating procedure.
Yes,
That when we
yes.
open that budget, we're going to see our audited financials from last year.
Yes,
Compare.
and the numbers that she dropped in the spreadsheet even though the audit wasn't issued, those numbers were final. Like,
Yeah.
what she put in there, nothing changed. So, and that can continue to happen, because it's, usually the numbers are like finalized, it's some of the ancillary information that needs to be pulled together. The footnotes, making sure, debt service schedules are correct, the management discussion and analysis, like making sure that that's accurate. And that's where I spent the lion's share of my time, was going back and saying like, oh, no, that's not the reason that this category changed, or, something changed here. This is what actually happened.
I mean, those are the two things off the top of my head from last year. And like I said, I just want to make sure that it's standard operating procedure for this year. And
Yeah.
then we're good.
But to answer your question, I found Shelby's numbers far more helpful when working on the budget than I did the audit.
Yeah.
The audit was telling me what I already knew because of Shelby's numbers. And
Well, see,
then it had the recommendations for, things that we need to do to strengthen our process and procedure. But, I wasn't surprised by anything I saw in the audit.
Well, the audited financial statements, the information is rolled up to such a high level
Right.
that it is not helpful for budgeting.
Correct.
You need to have the Shelby spreadsheet, because that gives you the line by line.
Right.
Whereas the audited financial statements, it's like,
well,
public safety, like, here's your number.
the auditor, okay, the auditor why we got the audit, with the auditor, that audit report that we got in December or early January, the final audit report, okay, that was from 23. What I'm saying is that for 2024, okay, we should have, our accounting should have a report, a financial report for us, okay? And and we're not alone. I mean, the other counties have done this late as well, but I think in lieu of where we are and what we're looking at for our town, I think that we should have a lot of emphasis that we have that, our auditor's report, okay, by May here, so that we really have something to work from. The auditor, all he's going to do is come in and make sure he's certifying the audit. Okay, that's what he's doing. And I just think it's a big thing, okay, and I think that we can, as we go up, remember, where we talk about the towns around us, okay, and there was a couple of questions that people said, well, this, even with the assessment the full assessment, we were very fortunate because we were one of the few towns that had 100% assessment, okay? And that's not a mandate. That people have asked that question, is that a mandate by the state? It's not, but it's really good governance to have full assessment, okay? But most of the folks that I've spoken to, their biggest concern was, I wish I was being billed correctly, or had paid a little bit each year rather than having this big lump sum that came out, okay? But we're here now and we're going to get through it. And I think the assessments that they have, I relate to them that I think it's pretty fair. It's a big jump, but I think we were under assessing in a lot of cases. And when I looked at, even with community preservation, the land or properties, okay, properties always sold for way more than what the assessed value is. But I think our job, okay, is to bring a budget in that's and not wait to the end until October. I think we should be working on it, and we need to bring that down. And I think we may have to walk away from some things that have been presented even to here today. 35,000 here, 35,000 here. It all adds up and it makes up a thing. So that's my take on it, okay? And I think that we just need to pull it apart.
Bumped the email for everybody that has the financial report from January that shall be sent in the middle of February. And Amber's actually pulling it up on her
I'm pulling
computer.
up the February one. Shelby sent this to me yesterday or today. This is not going to go out yet, because we pay for things in 2025 that actually belong in 2024. So the the contract accountants, historically, in the early part of the year, we fly a little blind, and I'm trying to change that for this year because they're caught up in the 2024 expenses are caught up in 2025. So the contract accountants are giving us journal entries to pull those and put them back into 2024. So the numbers that I'm going to bring up right now are not correct because we are going to make those journal entries. So
Talking about the February one or the
the
January?
February one, yeah, and even the January one, because
I'm looking at the
January,
January.
yeah, January has a lot of 2024 expenses
Mhm.
in it so it's not a useful report. Like, you can't tell how you're doing against budget. So she's actually upped her game on this so that she's got a cover sheet, which is not something that we used to have. So it tells you exactly what you've got going on here. But just to go down, she's throwing in some payroll total, she's throwing in, the abstracts that were paid in total, just some high level information. Then she's got some, this is historically the financial report that supervisors, give on a monthly basis, which in my mind is absolutely worthless. You have a starting balance of your cash and class account balances, you've got your receipts, your expenses, and what your ending balances are for checking class accounts. To me, this tells you absolutely nothing, like how we're doing spending. Our budgets aren't broken out on monthly bases or anything. Then she's got a summary of expenditures in here. So if you want to look at departments, you can see, what the modified budget is. We haven't, I think, we've done one or two modifications so far.
What's the date on this report? I don't.
This is,
I'm
you don't
looking
have
at-
this one. This is a February.
Good.
And it's not going to be released because we want the contract accounts. We'll find out tomorrow at that meeting when they're going to have those for us. Once those get posted, then we will issue the February numbers. But, so by department, you can see like what the budget is and what's been expended so far. And you've got the percentage remaining. And some of this, 80% 2 months into the year may be right, but then other departments like Kevin, he doesn't usually spend his money on computers. Like, he does it all at the end of the year because if something crashes, a server goes down, he wants to be able to pivot and spend money on a crashed server. And so he'll order, 3 or 4 less laptops at year end. But on an annual basis, he gets his laptops in and replaces the one. So he's got his program going, but he's conservative and doesn't spend his money until later in the year for that reason, other than the contracts and subscriptions that we have to do. So we've got these overall high level, here's your expenditures by department. Then the part of the report that's really important to me is the detail of expenditures. This is where you want to pay attention and see, like, where is the spending going?
This is where we make the adjustments when we're doing the budget.
Yeah.
At this
At
level.
this level, budget transfers. So this is what you want to watch. And so on this one, you've got the Ethics Board, Professional Services, their budget, $2,787. We expended $1,816, so we only have a remaining balance of $970. That, we've only got 34% of the budget. There is probably a December 2024 invoice in there that needs to get reclassified out, so that number will not look so bad. We also are working with an interim attorney, so there was also a budget transfer. I don't know off the top of my head if that budget transfer was incorporated into these February numbers. But like, this is the level that you want to look at. So if you want to start to see how we're doing, once this report gets released, then you can start to look at it. And that's where you can start to ask department heads, pointed questions. And if you're looking for cuts, the question is going to be, for the most part, what programs do you want to cut? How do you want to modify services that you're delivering? That, like, those are going to be, if you want to try and find savings. Then my question to you is, if you should find $100,000 worth of savings this year, we've already assessed the taxpayers that $100,000. What are you going to do with that $100,000? What's your plan?
Well,
I mean-
at the end of the year, where does it go?
It goes into fund balance.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure you understand that, like,
That's all I want. That's basically because the fund balance is what we've used, okay, to balance the budget. I know how many,
400.
400, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's the worst that can happen. But I think it just sets a tone going forward if you do it now, when you start to do the 2026, you'll be looking at a different,
No, and I already made the comment to Shelby earlier today. It's like, I want to start looking at the budget now, like doing my part of, starting, but then have department heads come in to really truly understand, like, what is the ask that we're going to be making of department heads? Like, what programs are you going to basically cut? Because it's going to be a tougher year than ever.
that's the only reason I brought it up, because, I guess it started last week, and I thought it was really appropriate that we, what came out of this whole thing is that we as a town board, our budget, or what we intend on spending, is what's going to determine the tax rate. Okay, and I think we should get ahead of it, because it's a big thing. Okay, we have lots of things going on, and I guess I would say Fat City is over, because whatever you got to really, even though you may not think the budget has been fat, we do have to look at it differently, and there's going to be some hard decisions. Okay.
I think honestly, having looked at this over the years, there is not a lot of fat. Are there little tiny pockets here and there? Perhaps, but we're not going to find a lot of fat.
Well,
I have to find my analysis at the beginning of budget season last year. I didn't go back and revise it, and I will go back and do that. But 5.4% of the increase last year was salary increases. So yeah, part of that is contract negotiations. Police increase was 2.4%. Highway was 3%. And then we did the 3.7% to kind of do catch up for non-unionized employees. We can't do anything about the 2.4 or the 3%. So we could take it out of the raises that we grant non-union employees. The health insurance costs went up. Our control over that, there's very little. I got one idea that may be able to help us on our post health insurance. There was a session that I went to, Association of Towns, that I'm going to be bringing that person in to take a look at our post health insurance benefits.
Like
for
retirement
retirees.
benefits?
Yeah, so we may be able to negotiate a better cost pull them out of our health insurance plan and put them into something that's comparable but less expensive. But our pension, like that increase, so there was out of the, what was our increase last year? I didn't remember, I blocked it up.
0.8 or something?
7.8% or whatever it was. 5.4% of that was things that we can't control unless we start cutting staff. So we'd have to cut employees, and then that would lessen the retirement pay, and it would lessen the health insurance. But some of it we can't change. So
Lessen our ability to do our jobs.
I'm not even
For the
going.
town's
I'm not even going there.
It's not good to balance your budget using the fund balance. I mean, that,
Oh, I've said that for years.
no, I'm just saying to you, but that's been the,
And we've been a little bit fortunate that we do have some fund balance that we've been able to use, but each year, the amount that rolls into fund balance, because we've had some extra revenues, or, there has been a little bit of non-spending in certain areas, has allowed us to then normalize things with increases by pulling from fund balance. The closer we cut to the bone, we will not be generating any fund balance for which to pull from. So it's just, there's so many components to this. And I welcome further input, because it was a nightmare year last year.
we're probably gonna learn a new term, which is called no. We may have to say no to certain things, okay? I mean, we see every day, everybody wants stuff, okay? But I'm in, okay?
I don't see us saying yes a lot.
No.
And last year, there were a lot of department heads. That I said no to, like earlier today, we talked about Ken Snow and salt money, like, no. Yeah. Was there anybody else? I didn't, since I didn't find that schedule, the file is still MIA on the WQI, but I'll find it for Karasik. Any other
finished.
board reports? Okay. All right. I know, Chip, you may be here, but it's not something that we can talk about in a public session, but I do want to grab you. I know it has to do with doc code, so.
I don't know if you want.
I do. I saw your truck go by earlier today when I was looking out the window, and I'm like, I don't have his phone number. But anyways, I'll grab you after this. So we were going to go into an executive session to discuss the employment history of an employee.
Make that motion.
Seconds?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.